Okay. This is going to be intense. Good day, good day, good day. Yeah, it's going to be an intense day, I guess. Very intense day. Try and try to figure out this real quick. 1 second. Ooh, ooh. Hello? Audio good. Can you hear me? Hello? Hi. So what did I miss? Tell me. Tell me what I missed. Because I hear there's a lot of stuff that happened. Tamara Lich coming up soon. Where's Daisy? I don't. I don't know. I hope he's all right. He's got a lot. You know, we all have lives. We all have things going on in the background. You got to understand, like doing this 45 hours a week or whatever. You know, or it's a lot. So, you know, he's got a lot of stuff going on in the background there. So, personal. Everyone's got a life, right? Here, so there was James Bauder, and who was first in the morning? I forget. I mean, I can't listen. It's day 5. This is not even day. This is day 16, which was so. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. JB. Yeah, JB. I heard some controversy there. JB Dichter. BJ Dichter. What happened, guys? Tell me quick. We don't have that much long. What? Give me the Cliff Notes version. What did we miss? What happened? I've seen bits and pieces here and there, and yeah, we kind of. I think most people anticipated a little bit of that. Everyone kind of knew it was coming. You know, you have an individual who's largely unknown, very quiet. You know, it's really a wild card there. So certainly, you can anticipate that. You know, a lot of different kind of questions surrounding certain individuals and certain things that did or didn't happen, and you know, very weird circumstances of different things. So we all knew that there was different, you know, there's all different possibilities for whatever was going to be said today. Certainly, I hope we did all anticipate that. Much ado about honking. James did fabulous. Okay, well, I caught the very last exchange there with Champ and the Champ coming back up after the objection there. I caught that last thing as I was pulling in on the Bluetooth. So I was able to hear that. I heard about that. Yeah, well, yeah, Paula, I think it's just you because I am not hearing it from anyone else. I think we're clear as mud here. We're clear as mud coming through, and of course, I'm happy I'm going to be able to catch Tamara. It's great. Yeah, I seen that thing, and he quoted that the greatest Justin Trudeau quote ever. The water boxes sort of thing there. Water bottle, juice box sort of thing, or sorry, water box bottle sort of thing, whatever that stupid quote is. And they were arguing about the Justine thing as if that's some sort of big derogatory name. You know, out of the names I've heard, it's certainly on the list. It's certainly bottom of the list. Um, I've called him that, and I'm nowhere near transphobic or anti-LGBT or anything like that. You know, it's more just like a playground sort of name, in my opinion. And it's like there's a lot of worse things to call this guy. There's way worse, which would be, and some could make the argument more fitting depending on those names. So certainly one of the most mild names. That was a toss and a fail right there from that camp. That did not that was not received. It's hilarious. And the media, I see that there's posts talking about the $24 million as if it's some sort of huge revelation. We already knew that they raised 20+ million dollars, and I haven't seen or heard evidence of Russia, or the U.S. And as we all know, it's been testified by the OPP that Russia and U.S. had really nothing to do with it. Here's a loose quotation with the end there, an exact quotation from Superintendent Patrick Morris of the Ontario Provincial Police Provincial Operations Intelligence Bureau, and what he had to say about Russia and the USA and being involved in money or anything like that. Complete nonsense. To quote Superintendent Morris, sensational and exasperated. So when the media is talking about this $24 million, what they're really doing is saying, "Wow, these people raised $24 million in 9 days from Canadians. That's an enormous amount of support. Very well done." And I'm glad to see. I'm looking on the social media, and I'm looking in the media tweets, and I'm reading the replies, and I'm happy to see that people are pointing that out. That it literally all it shows is that there's an amazing amount of grassroots support here. Really great. Huh. This is hilarious. So hilarious. I did catch that thing. So the Justine trying to dunk on Justine again. That's nothing. That's nothing. There's it's like the left and how what do they call Pierre Polyev? They call him
Order allowed.
They call him a lot of things. They call him Skippy.
The commission is
They
reconvened.
call him Millhouse. They call him a lot nastier things too. So it's really common for people to have in our Canadian politics to have nicknames for different
Commissioner.
people.
The next witness is Tamara Lich.
And certainly everyone does it. And this one, that one is a schoolyard insult. It's really nothing to do with hatred of any sort, and that's a ridiculous, preposterous assertion. Implicate that has that suggestion
Leach,
is
will
foolish.
you swear on a religious document, or do you wish to affirm?
Justine Trudeau trying to make that some sort of statement of hate. Absolutely ridiculous. But certainly these people are saying Millhouse or PP or whatever. So when people call Pierre Polyev PP, are they sexually harassing him? Are they sexually harassing Pierre Polyev when they call him PP
For the record,
or whatever?
please state your
Is
full
that a
name and spell
sexual
it out.
harassment claim?
Tamara
Is that
Lich,
attempted?
L-I-C-H.
Is that attempted
Do you
sexual
swear
harassment?
that the evidence
So
to be
that's
given
how
by you to this commission
schoolyard insult.
shall be the truth, the whole truth, and
Get
nothing but
over
the
it.
truth, so help you God?
I do
Get
so
over
swear.
it.
Thank you.
And stop drinking those
Sir, Brendan Miller for Freedom Corp and also counsel to Ms. Leach.
water
We
box
have
bottle
already
sort of things.
invoked in writing on October 7th, 2022, all the proper provisions of the relevant statutes with respect to testimony here today. But I believe my friend's consenting that I can have that invocation.
I don't agree with that, Marin. I don't know which part you're replying to.
HRF 0001610, please. And if we can just scroll down to, I believe, the third page.
So again, like
Fourth,
whenever
my
they're
apologies.
talking about PP and they say it that way,
And there's
are
the
these
invocation.
are these
And thank you,
left
sir.
left-leaning individuals sexually harassing Pierre Polyev when they say
I
that?
understand
That's
she's,
the same level.
under
That's the same
subpoena,
level of
so
accusation here.
Just confirming that.
Just
Okay,
to point
thank
out
you.
the hypocrisy and
Good
the
afternoon,
foolishness of it
Ms.
all, and
Leach.
the grandstanding and so forth.
My name is John Mather. I'm Commission Counsel. I'm going to start with some questions about your background. Can you tell the Commission where you were born?
Saskatoon, Saskatchewan.
And where do you live now?
Medicine Hat, Alberta.
And could you tell us, in brief, just give us a summary of your employment history?
I've been primarily oil and gas logistics and administration.
And we understand, or the Commission understands, that prior to COVID-19, you were politically active. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I was.
Okay. You were, among other things, a regional coordinator for Wexit in southeastern Alberta.
Yes, sir.
You were on the board of directors for Wexit Canada.
Yes, sir.
And at one point, you were vice president of communications for Wexit Canada.
Yes, I was.
For those who may not be as familiar with Alberta politics, can you explain what Wexit is?
Wexit started out as a movement, I guess, based off of the Brexit movement that started in the UK. And I joined that movement. I was very concerned about the things that I was seeing happening to Western Canadians in politics, and became, I guess, a bit of an advocate. So I got involved in the movement, and we morphed into a provincial and a federal party.
And at one point, Wexit merged into the Wild Rose Independence Party. Is that correct?
It did, yes.
And you, at some point, left that party and then joined the Maverick Party. Is that correct?
How that happened was I was sitting on two boards when it first came out, the provincial Wexit Alberta as well as the Wexit Canada. And during COVID, my husband and I relocated to Manitoba for about 19 months during the pandemic. So I left that board right as that merger happened. But I stuck with the Wexit Canada board, and then we renamed ourselves into the Maverick Party.
So is Maverick essentially Wexit but with a new name?
Basically.
And when you said you had concerns about, I think, how the West was being treated, can you expand on what those concerns were?
Yes, sir. At that time, we were dealing with Bill C-69 and Bill C-48, And I was just seeing friends and family that worked in the energy industry in Alberta suffering as a result of some of that legislation. There was job losses, and I just saw people losing their jobs and coming into my office, handing me their resume with tears in their eyes, asking for a job 2 weeks before Christmas. And I just felt like I needed to get involved and exercise my democratic rights.
And again, for people who maybe not be as familiar, can you explain how those bills, at least in your mind, led to the job loss you're talking about?
Well, Bill C-69 was the No More Pipelines bill, and I think you can recall at that time there was the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and other pipelines that they had been discussing or proposing, Energy East, for an example. And when all those got canceled, a lot of people didn't have any work.
What is the goal of the Maverick Party?
The goal of the Maverick Party was to seek constitutional reform for better equality for Western Canada, or to seek an independence, very much like what Quebec has, being referred to as a nation within a nation.
And what can you give any examples of the constitutional reform that the Maverick Party is seeking?
I believe one of them was the getting more equal seats in the House of Commons. I mean, a big concern for people in the West is that every election, before the polls even close in Alberta, it's already decided. The elections are already decided. So I think myself and a lot of people in the West just felt like we didn't really have a voice in the House of Commons.
Does the Maverick Party consider the federal government to have too much power?
I don't necessarily think so.
And going back to the constitutional reforms that you referenced, and then I think the next thing you said was if there isn't constitutional reform, then ultimately the goal of the Maverick Party is independence from Canada. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Have you ever been a trucker, Ms. Leach?
Never.
The commission understands that in 2019, you also participated in the Yellow Vest movement.
I did.
Can you explain what the Yellow Vest movement was?
Well, at that point, there had been Yellow Vest. I'm sorry, I don't speak French. I'm not sure of the French term, but there had been similar protests in France. And the organization that I joined in, Medicine Hat, again, was primarily to deal with the legislation against our energy industry, which is what we were advocating for. And we would have rallies every Saturday from 1 to 2 in front of the Tim Hortons and stand there with flags and hold signs, that kind of thing.
And so those Yellow Vest rallies were rallies in opposition to the same legislation we spoke about earlier?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that it was, maybe is inspired the right word by the movement in France? What would be the right word?
I guess inspired, maybe.
And were you aware that the movement in France eventually came under some controversy for being associated with Islamophobia?
I was not aware of that, no.
And so I think you mentioned
Desperation.
but it's the commission's understanding that you were the organizer of the Yellow Vest rallies in Medicine Hat.
I kind of moved into that role like I said, I was going to the rallies and meeting people and offered to help in any way that I could.
And it's the commission's understanding that the Yellow Vest in Medicine Hat ended up changing its name. Is that right?
Yes, they did.
And why did the Yellow Vest group in Medicine Hat change its name?
I read this morning an article, and I don't really remember what happened at that time, but I did see in the evidence that I was reviewing last night that there had been death threats against the Prime Minister. So clearly we wanted to distance ourselves from that.
Right. And so if I could pull up COM 50908. And then if we could scroll down to the headline. This is an article from January 12th, 2019, and says, following death threats to Trudeau, Yellow Vest Medicine Hat looks to change their name. Is that the article you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And the article states that not on the Medicine Hat Facebook page, but on the more general Yellow Vest Canada Facebook page, there had been death threats that had been posted about Prime Minister Trudeau. Do you recall that occurring at the time?
Faye, I don't really recall that, but I do recall that we did change our name. I'm not sure what the threats were per se, but we did change our name.
And did the name change? I appreciate you might not recall the specific threats, but the name change was as a result of those.
Yes, yes. That's not something that I ever advocated for or anybody that I was associated with in the Medicine Hat movement.
Right. And if we could go to page 3 of the article. It quotes you, Ms. Leach, as saying, "Stave positive is number 1. We don't want any name calling, bashing, or belittlement. Respecting people's privacy is also a big one. We will not tolerate threats, hate speech, or anything like that. We don't want that kind of stigma attached to our cause." Do you see that there?
Yes,
And I take it that's a view you held at the time and a view you still
Absolutely.
hold today?
absolutely.
Right. And that's ultimately you had to deliver a similar message at times when it came to the protests in Ottawa. Is that true?
I did, yes.
The commission has heard evidence on a few occasions about a convoy in 2019 called United We Roll. Are you familiar with that convoy?
I am.
Did you participate in that convoy?
I did not.
Did you have any involvement in that convoy?
I didn't have involvement in that convoy other than maybe connecting people's phone numbers or getting people connected that were going. At the same time as that United Reroll was starting, there was a lot of, I guess, mini convoys, I would call them, in little communities. And so I was a part of organizing the little one that went through our community.
So you connected people's phone numbers and then organized a smaller convoy within Medicine Hat?
Yes, sir.
Can you provide more detail about what you mean when you say you were connecting people's phone numbers?
Well, just because I've moved around a lot, I know a lot of people, and that would have been the extent of my involvement if someone was looking for a contact number, per se.
Were you aware at the time that Pat King was involved in the United We Roll convoy?
That's when I first heard of Mr. King.
And how did you first hear of Mr. King?
I was on social media, so of course, you're scrolling and you would see video. So that's how I came to know of him. He had a social media live stream. He was live streaming it.
During United We Roll, did you ever communicate with Mr. King?
No, I did not.
When was the first time you communicated with Mr. King?
The first time I ever remember communicating with him was after we had started this convoy.
So in the context of the
Yes.
Ottawa convoy?
Yes, sir.
We'll get back to that in a minute. Between United We Roll and the Ottawa convoy, did you follow Mr. King on social media?
I followed Mr. King until the United Reroll was over, and then I stopped following him at that point.
And when we talk about following, did you make a deliberate decision to click on follow on Facebook?
I did,
And why did you make that decision at that point in time?
because it was over and I really had no further reason to follow him.
Did you come to form an impression of Mr. King's views in following him during United We Roll?
I thought he was loud, very boisterous. Other than that, I didn't really know too much about him.
Do you recall finding anything he said offensive with respect to United We Roll?
I don't recall that, no.
Did you communicate with James Bauder at all during United We Roll?
I don't believe so, no.
Do you remember when the first time was that you met Mr. Bauder?
I would have met Mr. Bauder for the first time in person in Ottawa this past winter.
Right. And then had you met him virtually before then?
No. Or sorry, when we were organizing, my apologies. Yes, as we organized, he was in the meetings.
So again, within the context of
Yes, sir.
January 2022?
Yes.
So moving now to the Freedom Convoy, how did you get involved in the Freedom Convoy?
A friend of mine sent me Mr. Barber's TikTok video where he was calling for a shutdown on the 23rd of January. She sent me that video and I watched it and I texted her back right away and I said, well, what do you think about possibly another convoy to Ottawa? And she kind of laughed and said, well, it didn't really accomplish much. I mean, it was great to see the crowds come together, but
Could
They-
you just slow down a bit, please? for
sorry,
the
yes, sir.
Translators.
Yes, sir. And then I'd reached out to another friend and I asked him the same thing. And we just sort of came to the same conclusion that we weren't sure if that was an idea that would be successful. A friend of mine or an acquaintance of mine from Red Deer that was involved in the United Reroll gave me Mr. Barber's phone number, and I contacted him on January the 13th. And we discussed, I can't really remember the details of the conversation. I do remember that I said, I'm here to help you in any way I can. My background is logistics and organization and administration, and you are going to need social media and you're going to need some funding. And if I can help you at all, I'd be happy to do that.
A few questions arising out of that. Do you remember who the acquaintance was that gave you Mr. Barber's phone number?
Yes, it was Glenn Carrot.
Okay. And did Mr. Carrot participate in the convoy, do you know?
He did not.
And the two friends that you indicated you had a conversation with about whether or not a convoy again was a good idea, who were they?
Cindy Parker from Medicine Hat. She ended up assisting on the finance committee that I was going to create, and she also assisted with the social media.
Yeah.
And Kevin Tuchinski, he was a friend of mine that I worked with in Manitoba.
And I understood from your answer, but correct me if I'm wrong, that both Miss Parker and I'm going to mispronounce the last name, Mr. Lichinsky, was that?
Tuchinski.
Tishinsky, did they participate in United We Roll?
No, not to my knowledge.
So why did you want to get involved in the convoy? Why did you want to reach out to Mr. Barber?
I was growing increasingly alarmed with the mandates and the harm that I was seeing the mandates inflict on Canadians. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional. I'll try not to. And I just felt like I needed to exercise my democratic rights. I have tried over the years emailing MPs and just never got a response. And I just felt that this was important for Canadians who had been living under lockdowns and restrictions for 2 years.
When you say emailing MPs, had you been emailing them about COVID-19 mandates?
I believe I did once, yes, but I had emailed previously, like I said, in conjunction with the Bill C-69 and Bill C-48, and never felt like anyone was listening to me. And I know it wasn't me. There was other people that were emailing also, and you just get these, thanks for contacting our office, blow off emails.
So you had formed this impression that you were having difficulty getting someone to listen to you in the government based on letters you sent primarily with respect to the pipeline issues we've been talking about?
That's correct, yes.
How had COVID-19 restrictions or mandates affected you personally?
Well, I lost my job.
This is an
My
incredible
husband
amount of
also lost his
like,
job on the same day.
what is this?
Let's
all agree, folks,
run a pilot truck business, and a lot of
that-
their business was involved crossing the border, which they were no longer allowed to do. At the time of the convoy, there was rumblings of stopping cross-border, interprovincial, travel if you were unvaccinated. My parents live
true.
in Saskatchewan. My
That's true. In
grandmother's
Quebec,
in
they were doing it.
Saskatchewan.
They were doing it in Quebec
And I
to
have a
Ontario.
daughter and a granddaughter in Manitoba.
I forgot
So
how far
I
it
found that
had gotten,
incredibly alarming.
how crazy it had
And why
gotten.
did you lose your job?
We were sent home, I guess, in early January because of the
Literally forgot
Omicron
how freaking
variant.
crazy it got. They were stopping
And,
interprovincial travel and
that
checking for vaccine
combined, obviously,
passports.
with the downturn in the economy at that time, they closed the
They
shop that I
were.
was
I had
working
forgotten about that.
at, and the majority of
Quebec
us
to
were laid
Ontario,
off.
they were doing that.
And what shop was that?
It was for an oil and gas services company.
I had forgotten about that.
Were you affected at all by vaccine passports or other restrictions on unvaccinated people?
We didn't go out. My husband and I played in a band. We weren't allowed to even go and play. Everything was shut down.
Loop.
That's part of the reason that we went to Manitoba after we both lost our jobs. We went to visit my daughter and realized that the city that we were in was basically a ghost town, and we would prefer to be out on the farm in the country, helping them on the farm and being productive.
What did you want to achieve by participating in the Freedom Convoy?
I was hoping that somebody would come and listen to us and listen to the concerns that we had, essentially, about the mandates in particular.
Did you have a goal beyond having someone come and listen to you about the mandates?
No, we wanted to be heard. We wanted to have discussions. We wanted to end the mandates.
Was your goal to have the mandates end, or was a discussion enough, or was that something you hadn't turned your mind to?
For me, I feel if we
See
would
you
have
later,
just been
Ruckus.
able to have a discussion with somebody, that would have at least opened a dialogue. And as the convoy came across Canada, you know, Canadians were telling us, don't stop until we're free, don't stop until the mandates are lifted. So honestly, a bit of both.
The frustration that you were describing with respect to mandates,
Thank you
did
for that,
feel
tinfoil hat guy.
familiar to the frustration you had been feeling with respect to the pipeline and oil and gas issues?
I was much more frustrated over the mandates.
And why was that?
Because I was seeing families torn apart. The suicides in my hometown were so numerous that they stopped reporting them. Elderly people were dying by themselves in long-term care facilities and saying goodbye over iPads. My grandma is 94 years old, and she was locked in her little apartment by herself for 2 years. And now that she can go out and do things, she's not healthy enough. She lost 2 years of her life. My father is, I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
My father is a very social man. He is the Coffee Row, Saskatchewan father. And I remember him telling me one day that he went down to the local restaurant that he went to every single day. And these are small towns where everybody knows everybody, and he was asked to leave. And I didn't want my children and my grandchildren to live in a world like that. I was becoming increasingly alarmed listening to my prime minister call me a racist and say that I shouldn't be tolerated. I found his rhetoric to be incredibly divisive, and I'm a believer that if you are a leader of a country, you have to lead all of your people, even if you don't agree with them. And I just saw so much. Coming across Canada every day, I heard stories. People, at least 3 people would tell me they were planning their suicides until we started the convoy. Or stories of people that we were too late. I heard from families that were living in their vehicles because they'd lost their jobs. I heard from people that had lost their jobs and lost everything. I have the tears of thousands of Canadians on my shoulder who every day told me that we were bringing them hope. I saw little old ladies praying on their knees on the side of the road, and I saw little children holding signs saying, "Thank you for giving me back my future." Sorry.
So you offered to help in reaching out to Chris Barber, and it's our understanding that one of the first things you did was create a Facebook page, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And started the GoFundMe campaign, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, I did.
And you did both of those things on January 14th?
I did. And a Twitter account also.
And a Twitter account. Was that different than the Twitter account that we saw earlier today? That was your personal Twitter
Yes,
account?
that was my personal one, yes.
With respect to GoFundMe, had you ever done fundraising before?
Not on that type of platform. Just community, selling chocolate covered almonds or stuff like that.
So never done an online social media driven
No.
fundraiser. And then it's the commission's understanding that on January 17th, you created, or the organizers created, a finance committee. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And can you explain what the finance committee's purpose was?
Yes, well, when I started the GoFundMe, I had asked, I think it was Mr. Barber, what should I set the target for? And he said $200,000. And I said, no way. I kind of laughed. I was like, that sounds greedy, and I don't believe that we'll ever hit that. And I said, well, how about I set it for $100,000? And I said, I feel even funny about doing that. I was literally expecting maybe $20,000 in donations, which I was prepared to handle. I felt I would be able to handle that with my very minimal accounting skills. And I can't remember what the total was up to on Monday morning, but I realized that I wanted to create a finance committee so that Canadians that were donating this money would rest assured that we were going to be open and transparent and accountable, and that they would know exactly what was happening with their donations. I just felt that was so important.
And how would a committee assist with that?
Well, there was, in the initial meeting, there was 2 bookkeepers that had obviously accounting experience. Cindy Parker was also on that committee. Nolene Villebren joined us also. She's a clan mother, a Dene clan mother from the Northwest Territories. And we were in consultation with a chartered accountant in Medicine Hat. So we formed the committee. Obviously, we had a lot of things to figure out, such as how we were going to pay the costs of the truckers to get to Ottawa. And they came up with some calculations based on distance. I'm not sure if it's been entered in evidence, it might be, but because clearly if you're driving from Vancouver, it's going to be, way more expensive than if you're coming from someplace in Ontario.
And we'll get into that more in a minute. Commission also understands it was around January 21st, 2022, when the GoFundMe donations hit $1 million. Does that sound accurate?
Probably. There was a lot going on then, but yeah.
Yeah, in and around there?
Yes.
What was your reaction when that milestone was hit?
I believe I was blown away. We did not see that coming, did not expect that we were going to have that level of support. And it was funny as we were driving across Canada and the committee member or somebody would call me or text me and say, you got to bump it up again, because there was a few days there where Canadians were donating $1 million a day. And it was very exciting and exhilarating, of course, but at the same time, I would just feel myself almost getting like more and more anxiety, because from my view, when you're talking that kind of money, the lawyers are coming. And here we are today.
Right, because that kind of money, in the millions of dollars, a lot of responsibility.
It's a
comes with that.
massive responsibility.
Other than set up the finance committee, what else did you do to address the responsibility that came with having millions of dollars?
Well, as you heard from Mr. Dichter, I contacted him, and I was, for the same reason that we added Chris to the accounts, I didn't want to be solely responsible. So I added him onto the GoFundMe campaign, just as I had added Chris Barber as a signatory on my accounts.
Anything else?
Probably. Sorry, my mind went blank.
That's okay. And then on February 2nd, 2022, we understand that $1 million from the GoFundMe account was transferred to a TD bank account in your name. Is that accord with your recollection?
Yes, sir.
And then that TD bank account was frozen the next day. Is that Does that sound right?
That sounds about right, yeah.
And then there was actually another TD bank account that got frozen. Is that correct?
Yes, we opened another, or I opened a checking account underneath that account so that we could keep the e-transfers separate from the GoFundMe donations. I don't know why, I just thought it would be maybe easier that way to keep them distinct. I wasn't sure, obviously, again, what was going to happen, and I was trying to just make sure that all the boxes were ticked and everything was going to be easily identifiable or easy to account for, I guess is a better way.
Right, and it's the commission's understanding that donations were received both through GoFundMe and through e-transfers, and what I understand you'd be saying is to segregate where the money came from, you opened a second account specifically
1,010.
for e-transfers?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Within a few days, or probably
picture
actually
of
within a couple days of the GoFundMe campaign, we were receiving messages about people that were very hesitant to use the GoFundMe platform, and they were requesting an alternative method to donate money. So that's why we started that.
How did you find out that your bank accounts had been frozen?
Mr. Chadiros and I had gone down to the bank. The lawyers had flown in, and we were going to cover the cost of that flight. And so we went down to the TD Bank here in Ottawa, and we were going to wire that company. And that's when we were told, no, there's a hold on your account. The lady was excellent. She gave me a note and said, there's a Mr. J. Stein that has left his name on here if you could contact him. And then she indicated that he was working with the fraud department.
If we could pull up com.or 705, and Ms. Leach, while it comes up, this is the overview report that was presented this morning with respect to crowdfunding. And if we could go to paragraph 87, which is on page 33. So here, Ms. Leach, it's describes that on February 5th, 2022, you attempted to make a wire transfer to Northern Air Charter, PR Inc. from an Ottawa TD branch. This transaction was denied. Is this what you were referring to just previously?
Yes.
And that was the flight, I think you said, that had brought Mr. Wilson and your husband and others to Ottawa?
That's correct, sir.
Who approved the using of the funds for that purpose?
Oh, boy. I'm not sure if at that time we had already had the board created or not.
And the board, are you referring to the board of the directors for the not-for-profit corporation?
Yes, yeah, I don't know if that was created yet. I don't really remember, honestly. I think it was maybe with me and Chad and Mr. Barber.
Did you consult with the finance committee before attempting to use the money for that purpose?
I don't believe I did.
Do you know
I don't
why
recall.
sorry.
That's okay.
Do you know why you didn't consult with the finance committee?
Other than it was very busy and crazy times, it was kind of chaotic at that point. So we recognized that we needed to have legal counsel and legal advice here on the ground. So I guess we felt it was just urgent, and so that's why.
If we could, we can take that down. In that same report, I won't turn it up, but it indicates that most of the $1 million was frozen and you weren't able to withdraw it from the account. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you recall how much you were able to withdraw?
I believe it was $26,000. So $10,000 of that, if you would like me to break it down for you.
You're anticipating my question, so yes, please go ahead.
$10,000 of that was wired to a bulk fuel supplier. $3,000 was e-transferred to another fuel provider. Chris and I had gone down, sorry, Mr. Barber and I had gone down to the TD, and we withdrew $3,000 in cash from one account and $10,000 in cash from, one branch, and then went to the next branch. And then, and I remember being very nervous about it because I was very conscious that we needed receipts when we needed to be accountable. And they were the road captains that went out and bought whatever supplies, fuel. I believe some of that went to fuel. And when they brought the receipts back, there was actually extra money in the kitty, so.
So when you're talking about the road captains, are you talking about the $13,000 that wasn't for the first two bulk fuel purchases you
That's
you had?
correct, yes.
And am I understanding you correctly that that money was distributed to the road captains?
I believe so. I didn't keep it. I had 10 million problems of my own, so I didn't want to be handling any of the cash. So I think I gave it to Chris, and then Chris distributed it to the road captains from there to provide fuel.
And the $10,000 that was used for the one bulk fuel purchase, do you recall where you purchased the fuel from?
I believe it was a company called fillerup.ca.
And there was also a
That's a
$3,000
classic
fuel
name.
purchase. Do you recall?
Classic
Yeah,
company
that
name.
went to Adam something, who was with the Quebec, the Quebec part of the convoy. I'm sorry, I can't remember his last name.
That's okay. After the fuel was purchased, how was it distributed?
The fuel
Yes.
that I left up to the professionals.
Did you, through dealing with the professionals, did you come to have any understanding of how they distributed the fuel?
I'm assuming with a fuel bulker of some sort, or I honestly don't know.
And when you're talking about the professionals, who are you referring to?
The truck drivers.
Was there anyone in particular or any people in particular who were responsible for overseeing the logistics of distributing fuel?
We did have a few volunteers that came on board. There was a gentleman that was there for the first, I think he was there for the first week, who looked after that. And then he had to leave, and another gentleman stepped in and took it over, who was from Alberta, Calgary, I believe. And then another gentleman from Ontario that assisted.
And who were those gentlemen?
The first one, I believe, was Joey Mitsu, M-I-Z-U. Tihan, I'm sorry, I don't know his last name. He was from Calgary. And then John Skubik, who was from Ontario.
What happened to the receipts that the captains returned?
I have them in an envelope in my room. They were scanned and sent. I believe Eva Chipiuk had scanned them, and there was one of the road captain's uncle was here, so he created a spreadsheet so that we could keep track of all of them also.
If we could go to GFM 156. So this is a GoFundMe attestation letter. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes.
Can you describe what this document is and what its purpose was?
I don't really remember the details. Is it okay if I read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it looks to me they just wanted confirmation on where the funds were going and how they would be distributed.
Right, and the clerk has scrolled down now, and what I want to ask you about is, it says, with the oversight of the Finance Committee, I will execute the following plan to meet the stated purpose of the fundraiser and distribute the funds raised and released to me. And then it sets out a process. Do you see that there?
I do, sir.
Do you recall making this form of commitment to GoFundMe?
I do, yep.
And it's our understanding that GoFundMe sought this sort of commitment as part of the ongoing discussion about whether or not it would release the funds. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe they were trying to do their due diligence.
And you see here, it sets out a process. Funds will be distributed via e-transfer directly from the TD Unlimited checking account, established in my name to individual convoy participants. Participants must submit their own convoy registration forms, fuel receipts, and verification for their participation from the road captain. To that, participant registration is verified by the respective road captains upon demonstration of completion, receipts, and confirmation of the journey to Ottawa. And reimbursement amounts will be calculated at an estimated rate of 62 cents per kilometer driven. Do you see that?
I do, sir.
So this attestation, it appears, was contemplating how people would be reimbursed on their way to Ottawa. Is that right?
Yes.
Was any similar plan made for disbursements once the convoy was in Ottawa?
Well, I guess what the finance committee, we decided to do was obviously come up with registration forms because we felt that that was really important, and a code of conduct also. And that is based off of the calculations that the finance committee had come up with to pay them for. So when it was not anticipated how large this was going to grow, I thought e-transfers would be a very easy way to disperse the money, and that's what the registration was for, so that we would have their contact information and their email addresses in order to make that happen.
So my question was with respect to distribution. Once you were in Ottawa, was the plan to use the registration forms once money was distributed in Ottawa as well?
That was the plan.
Did you follow that plan?
Well, we didn't need to because the funds were frozen and.
What about
returned.
for the $26,000?
I'm sorry?
What about for the $26,000?
Oh, that was from the e-transfer money, not the GoFundMe money.
So the GoFundMe money, you had a distribution plan, but for the e-transfer money, you did not?
That's correct.
Did you consider having a distribution plan for the e-transfer money?
At that point, I had handed over everything to the finance committee because once Mr. Barber and I got on the road, I was quite busy doing other things. So my communications with them were quite quick, and I trusted them. I trusted that they knew what they were doing, and yeah.
And while you may have turned things over to the finance committee, it's the commission's understanding, again, from testimony and documents that we've read, that you became the person associated with the GoFundMe campaign and the person associated with the $10+ million. Was that your experience?
Yes.
What impact did that have on you?
Well, it was incredibly, again, it was an incredible responsibility. And again, I wanted to always be as open and transparent about it as possible, which is why I started doing the lives so that I could let people know, what was happening. The finance committee has been formulated, and try and do little updates on what we were achieving at that point.
Did you get a lot of questions about the money and what you were planning to do with it?
Oh, of course. Yeah, everybody wanted to know about the money.
Did you get a lot of people approaching you and asking you if they could have some of the money?
I did, yes.
And Mr. Eros, who we've spoken about, had an interview with the commission, and he said that at some point after February 1st, he spoke with you on the phone, and you told him that you were feeling overwhelmed because a lot of people were circling you and asking for money. And he said that you called them vultures in a text message.
Yeah, that's how I didn't mean they were vultures. I just felt like the vultures are circling.
How did you handle having all these people circling around you and seeking money?
The best I could. I had created a finance committee to ensure that the money that was donated was protected and that I was protected. And I just wanted, I don't know. I just put one foot in front of the other, and I would just explain that I was not in a position, like this was not my money to give out.
Amazing point, Bonnie.
And that we needed to, the money was primarily, like it said in the GoFundMe campaign, primarily for it was for the truckers for fuel, food, and lodgings if needed. And so I couldn't buy hot dogs. I didn't feel like buying a sound system for $150,000 was appropriate when I couldn't get money out to give to the truck drivers. So I had a lot of people coming at me, and my hands were tied. At one point, I had somebody threatening that they were going to get a lawyer to come after me for the money, which was kind of ridiculous because that was really at that point just going to tie it up even longer.
I'm going to now ask you some questions about the organization of the Freedom Convoy. First question for you is, at the time, did you see yourself as one of the founders of the convoy?
A supporter.
Who did you see as the founders?
Mr. Barber and Miss Belton.
Did you view Mr. King or Mr. Bauder as founders of the convoy?
I did not.
When you joined, were you aware that they had been assisting in planning and promotion of the convoy?
I found out, and I can't recall if it was in my initial discussion with Mr. Barber or the next day. It would have been either the 13th or the 14th that I found out that they were involved, but I don't remember exactly which date.
I appreciate that you saw yourself as a supporter and you're not one of the founders. Did you come to see yourself as one of the leaders of the convoy?
I came to see myself as part of a team. And maybe it was because of the GoFundMe that my name was on, or maybe it was because of the live videos that I was doing. I felt I was perceived as that, but all I wanted to do was help.
Did you see yourself as having any say greater than anyone else on the team?
I did not.
And who did you see as the members of that team?
Obviously, Miss Belton and Mr. Barber, the road captains, Joe Jansen, Miranda Gassier, Ryan Mihilowitz, Dale Enns, Sean Thiessen. I hope I'm not forgetting anyone.
So when Mr. Wilson described you as an organic leader, do you agree with that statement?
I guess that's what I alluded to with my previous answer.
Right. And what I understood from your previous answer is that you were seen as the leader, but you yourself didn't feel that you were the leader.
Absolutely not.
Chris Barber in his testimony discussed that there was power struggles among the organizers. Was that something you observed as well?
It was, and I think when you have any type of organization, there's always power struggles involved, and ours was no different.
What power struggles did you observe?
I saw what I perceived was, people, organizations coming in, perhaps trying to take over, or I hate to use the word take over, but I believe that they were all there with the same goals that we had. It's just that maybe some had different agendas or were looking to possibly promote their own brand. There was obviously, I had a lot of people coming up to me as we were just talking about, telling me what I needed to do with the money, should do with the money, could be doing with the money, what I had to do, and it was very overwhelming.
What were some of the people or groups that were doing that?
The first one that I was concerned about was an organization called Taking Back Our Freedoms. And I felt, again, that they were there with the right end goal in mind. I remember they showed up with bags of swag. All of a sudden, I was getting pulled into meetings with, I believe it was Give, Send, Go, because we were looking at, there had been obviously problems starting with GoFundMe, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. And so I honestly don't, I remember being in meetings and conference calls, and I really didn't even know what was going on. And I had a discussion with Mr. Eros after one of those, and he was concerned.
When you talk about bags of swag, and that was is that a case where you were concerned that, well, the group might have had the same goals, they were seeking a promotional opportunity? Is that what you're referring to?
Essentially.
Right. Did you have concerns that there were other groups or individuals who were seeking to use the mass media coverage, and the $10 million as a way to promote themselves instead of focus on the cause?
Not that I can think of offhand now.
Did you ever turn your mind to whether or not this was acting as a promotional opportunity for yourself?
Absolutely not. I never in a million years saw this coming. I never had an agenda. I literally just wanted to help some truckers drive across Canada and stand in front of Parliament with some signs. That was literally what I had envisioned.
So the commission understands that you participated in a press conference on February 3rd, 2022. Mr. Wilson also attended. Do you know which conference I'm referring to?
I do.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that conference in a second. But first, I just want to understand when you first met Mr. Wilson.
They flew in on the evening of the 2nd of February, I believe, and it was quite late at night when they arrived. They came to, I think I was still at the Arc Hotel at that point, and they came up and introduced themselves. There was five lawyers, I believe, that showed up, and that's when I first met them.
And how did it come about that the convoy was looking for a lawyer?
Well, I know that there was a doctor that was in Ottawa with us that was quite concerned, I believe, about what he was seeing from these organizations that were coming in. And if I remember correctly, he's the one that set up a call with the JCCF.
Sorry, who was that doctor?
Dr. Francis Christian.
And was it your understanding at the time that it was the JCCF that had arranged for Mr. Wilson and others to come and assist the convoy?
Yes, yes.
And what was your understanding of what the JCCF was?
I had heard of them before. Never imagined I'd ever need to use them. About the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. So I at that point, I just understood them to be a charitable organization that assisted with legal cases, helping to fund defendants in legal cases such as this.
Had you met Mr. Wilson prior to February 2nd?
No.
So can you please explain to the commission how it came to pass that you met Mr. Wilson for the first time on February 2nd and then on February 3rd we're at a news conference with him?
Yes, I can. Again, there was a lot of pressure that was happening at this time. It was Mr. Marazzo and I think within the first day or so, I think he saw me running around and people pulling me in all sorts of directions, and he took me into a room and we sat
Sorry,
down.
guys,
and,
just
in
posting
his very
stuff. I'm
calm
so
voice,
busy.
he told me, you know, you need to take a day off. You need to just take a day and not do anything and just relax. So I decided, I thought, okay, well, maybe Thursday I'll just try and sneak away and have a nap, or, you know, just relax for a little bit. And so I agreed to it. I was like, okay, I'll try. And then we had a meeting, I think it was Tuesday evening. It was actually probably Tuesday that day that we had that talk. We had a meeting Tuesday evening, which would be the night before they arrived. And one of the gentlemen from Taking Back Our Freedoms told me I was to be at the Marriott Hotel for a press conference the next day at 1 o'clock.
So
And-
was that on the first going to the second or the second going? To the
I
third?
believe that was the first going into the second.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
I didn't, yeah.
And I said, no, I can't. I can't. I'm going to get some rest. And they were quite alarmed that I was turning them down. I have no media experience. I felt, and I'm not saying that this is what they were doing, but I felt at that point like I was literally being thrown to the wolves. They were going to take me to the Marriott, give me 10 minutes of media training, and then put me in front of the mainstream media. Like, I grew up in Saskatchewan. This is not my world, you know? And so I was, of course, I had a lot of anxiety, and it was a big responsibility for us here. You know, I was really concerned about being put in that situation, terribly unprepared.
So that was the first.
Yes, sorry, I haven't answered your question.
Oh,
yet.
so,
I
no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If you're.
Yeah, I forgot. I still hadn't answered it. So Mr. Wilson and the team came in on Tuesday night. We met with them. He explained to me his reasons for being there, which was a bit of concern for his children also. And I immediately liked him and his team. I told them about this press conference, probably begged him to help me because he's had experience with this. As someone who is a very trusting person, I was rapidly becoming aware that I needed to be careful who I trusted, if that makes sense. And so I trusted Keith and his team immediately. And he agreed to help me, and it was crazy. It was a crazy day. I can't remember if he drafted the statement I made, or perhaps the media committee our communications committee had something to do with that. Anyways, he agreed to help me, and they were like knights in shining armor, in my opinion.
You said in that answer that maybe we'll back up. So February 1st, I took it from your answer, it's fair to say you were already feeling overwhelmed by everything that was going on.
Yes, definitely.
And,
Before I left Medicine Hat, I was feeling overwhelmed.
and now you were being asked to do a press conference, which you were not feeling prepared to undertake. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And you said in your answer that you also were getting the sense you needed to be careful who you trusted.
Yes. Because as these groups would come in, I did trust them. I like, if you wanted to help, we need your help. You are welcome here. And in that instance, if I may back up just a bit. So as we were organizing before we even left, obviously the finance committee was one thing I recognized needed to be created instantaneously or right away. Our Facebook page was being inundated with messages that I was unable to keep up with. So I found volunteers and created a social media committee to have that, or to look after that. I then realized that we needed, I guess, a media team, or I guess a media team would be the best thing. So there was a little committee made with that, which you heard Mr. Dichter allude to today that he was a part of. And I forget where I was going. Could you ask me your question again, please?
My question was really, you said in the February 1st to 2nd period, you began sensing you need to be careful who you trusted.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted to understand what had caused you to have that feeling.
Yes. I just can't remember what my point was with the committees. But anyways, yeah, I felt at that point like everyone kind of, not everyone, I felt that some people didn't see me. They just saw $10 million over my head. And of course, as they would come in and these organizations would come in, and there were many, many wonderful organizations. And obviously we were very grateful for their help. But again, in that case, I was feeling as the days went on, I was getting more and more uncomfortable with them coming in and taking over the meetings that we like our briefing meetings. I actually left the Arc Hotel because all of a sudden they were in the room next to me on the 7th floor, which I thought was really odd. And one of the road captains made mention to me that we had a coffee in my room one morning, the road captains and myself. And they mentioned that when they left, they were opening and closing their door to see who was leaving my room.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but can you explain who the they is in this situation?
I'm not sure who the room was, who it belonged to, but Mr. Bauder and Mr. Peloso and their team were in that room.
And they were with the Taking Back Our Freedoms group?
Yes.
Was there any other groups causing you this sort of concern?
Not that I can recall.
And so what was different about Mr. Wilson and the people he was with?
What do you mean, why did I trust them?
Another way of putting it, yeah.
I felt that they were genuine. As I said, when Mr. Wilson was explaining to me his reasons, he was a lawyer, obviously. He was sent there to help us, but he was also had concerns, and he was concerned for the future of his children too. And I guess I had to trust them, and he gave me no reason not to.
And then at the next day, you did appear at the news conference with Mr. Wilson, is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
All right. And at that press conference, Mr. Wilson described you as the spark that lit the fire. Do you recall that?
I do.
Do you agree with Mr. Wilson? Were you the spark that lit the fire?
As I said, I never saw myself in that light, and I still don't. I feel like I was part of just an amazing team. I would not describe myself as the spark that lit the fire.
Appreciating everything you've said about Mr. Wilson, and I've heard you, did it concern you that Mr. Wilson opened the press conference by placing you in the spotlight like that?
I didn't really think about it, to be honest.
Now I want to ask you some questions about sort of your day-to-day life in Ottawa when you were participating in the convoy. And we've heard the evidence, and I've already heard you say we understand that it was a busy time, there was a lot going on. But can you give the commission a sense of what you were doing on a day-to-day basis?
Well, when I first arrived there, I was in and out of a lot of meetings. It is honestly a blur. We had kind of a joke there that one day felt like a week. There was so much going on, but we would have briefing meetings in the morning to lay out kind of what we anticipated for the day. As I said, when we first saw this taking off, our number one priority became safety. Safety for the drivers, safety for the participants, safety for the public. So we had a lot of briefings on making sure that, talking about things like keeping the emergency lanes open. I remember, if I remember correctly, I believe the first weekend we got there, we had some problems with, I heard Antifa, that were spray painting vehicles and breaking windows and putting nails under tires. And so they created block captains that could monitor throughout the evening to ensure that people were going to be safe from, I guess, anti-protesters or whatever they are.
So you attended the meetings. What else did you do?
Lots of meetings in the beginning. I was at the Swiss Hotel. It was so many meetings at the beginning, honestly. I tried to get out to talk to people. The first Sunday we were there, there was a church service that we attended, and I spoke with the clan mothers and Mr. Dichter.
And the commission's heard evidence, for instance, Mr. Marazzo, who described himself as responsible for logistics, Mr. Barber, who sounds like he spent a lot of time interacting with truck drivers and speaking with them. Mr. Dichter today talked about how he was responsible for public relations and messaging. We anticipate that Mr. Bulford's going to testify tomorrow and that he was responsible for security and other things. With all of that covered, did you have a specific responsibility?
Mother hen? No. I guess when I first got there was lots of obviously meetings to do with the finances and stuff like that. And as I said, they were, we ended up setting up a give, send, go. So there was conference calls and stuff like that. The details I couldn't tell you, but I got out to speak to the crowd and wanted to go see the people. And I went to 88 or the Embrum, I believe it was called. Saw and went to the truckers that were down on Parkway. So I spent some of my time just walking around in the crowd and talking to people.
And fair to say that once the money was frozen in terms of managing the finances, that was something that was mostly off the table?
Yes, yes.
I'm going to ask you about some of the people we've already discussed about and some of the people we've heard in the evidence. You've already talked about Mr. Eros, who we understand was the accountant for the non-for-profit corporation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How would you describe your relationship with Mr. Eros when he was in Ottawa?
He was a godsend. I will be forever grateful. That man dropped everything to come to Ottawa to help us with the accounting portion and GoFundMe and work with the legal team. And I thought he was great. I have very basic accounting skills, and so to have him come in was a huge load off my shoulders. He could understand what they were talking about. He knew the big words, right? And I was extremely grateful. We had a great relationship while he was here. Yeah.
And another name the commission's heard about is Joseph Bourgault.
Yes.
Did you know Mr. Bourgault prior to the convoy?
I did not know.
Did you know of him prior to the convoy?
I did not.
When did you first meet Mr. Bourgault?
I believe we had stopped in, I want to say, we had a stop along the way, maybe Sault Ste. Marie. I can't remember. Anyways, we had a little pit stop, and I believe it was Mr. Barber who introduced me to him.
And when Mr. Barber introduced you to him, was it your understanding that Mr. Barber and Mr. Bourgault knew each other?
I'm not sure if they knew each other or if he knew of him. I can't say.
Fair enough. What did you come to learn about Mr. Bourgault after meeting him?
He's a very good man. He was there also to exercise his democratic rights and express his concern for what he believed was happening in our country. Also, just a patriotic, good Christian man.
Did you learn anything about his background?
I knew he had a business in Saskatchewan, a successful farm implement business in Saskatchewan.
What contribution did Mr. Bourgault make to the Freedom Convoy?
Well, as I believe he paid for a lot of hotel rooms. He covered, I believe, at least the rental of one of the conference rooms, or maybe a couple of conference rooms there. Obviously, when the lawyers flew in, my husband was on that flight, and I was quite concerned because I didn't want nothing. I mean, when I started GoFundMe, my savings account was $1.13 overdrawn. So I made sure I put the $1.13 into it, right? So that I never wanted any questions asked. And so Mr. Bourgault actually took my husband and I into his room one day and offered to pay for what would have been, I guess, Dwayne's portion of that flight.
Did he do that?
In the end, no, because I believe after I was released from prison, I was told that Adopt a Trucker covered that flight.
In his interview with the commission, Mr. Eros said that at some point a Ryan Olson asked you for $100,000 to reimburse Mr. Bourgault for the hotel rooms he had paid for. Do you recall that occurring?
I don't recall that occurring, no.
The next person I want to ask you about is Mr. Bauder, who testified before you.
Yes.
Did you know about Mr. Bauder prior to the Freedom Convoy 2022?
I knew of him. I think maybe he was live streaming during the United Reroll Convoy too, or maybe that he was participating or involved somehow. So I knew of him. I did not know him.
What did you know about him?
Really nothing other than he was a participant in that convoy
Right.
at that point. I think he maybe had a podcast or not a podcast, but a live stream Facebook show.
Did you ever watch that?
Briefly, I might have watched a few clips as I was scrolling through Facebook, but I didn't follow him.
Do you have any memory of what he was streaming about when you did watch?
I'm not really, no.
When did you learn that Mr. Bauder was involved in the convoy?
Like I said, when I spoke with Chris, I can't be sure if it was the 13th or the 14th,
Right.
but their names had both come up. I talked to Mr. Barber on the 13th, and then I believe they had a meeting that evening over Zoom, and so 13th to the 14th.
At any point in time, did you become aware of the memorandum of understanding?
I did. I think it was quite a few days after that, and I do recall hearing about it. I've never read it. I really didn't pay any attention to it, to tell you the truth.
Do you recall what you were told about the memorandum of understanding?
Just that there was a memorandum of understanding.
Were you
out there.
given
It was,
any indication about what was in it?
no.
Mr. Wilson has testified and in his interview summary stated that members of the board had come to him at some point in time and asked him about the memorandum and whether or not it was, for lack of a better word, legitimate. Were you part of that conversation?
Maybe. I honestly don't recall that.
Did you interact with Mr. Bauder at all while you were in Ottawa?
I ran into him. I didn't really see him that much once we got to Ottawa. So I think I ran into him maybe a handful of times. And if we spoke, I believe it was just kind of a greeting and small talk. I really didn't have anything to do with him.
And we heard testimony today also from Benjamin Dichter. He testified that you two met sometime in 2017 or 2018. Is that accurate?
I thought it was 2019, but it could have been 2018.
It's possible. And then he testified that whenever you first met, that you stayed in somewhat regular contact after that. Is
Yes,
that
we
correct?
did. Yeah.
How would you describe the relationship between you and Mr. Dichter before the convoy?
I consider him a friend.
Do you still consider him a friend?
I'm not allowed to speak to him anymore.
Was Mr. Dichter testified that you asked him to take on a public relations role and messaging role? Was that correct?
I did, yes.
And as part of that, did you give Mr. Dichter permission to post on your Twitter account?
I absolutely did. I asked him to help me with my Twitter account, actually.
And why did you ask him to help with your Twitter account?
Because I was getting very, very busy. I was getting messages about the convoy, and I had my hands full with trying to focus on the Facebook page and help the social media committee, as well as preparing for our departure to Ottawa. So I just asked. I felt like he was excellent on Twitter. And I felt that he could help me with that, just to kind of, I guess, keep getting the message out or the progress.
And the next person I want to ask you about is Mr. King. If I understand correctly, you became aware of Mr. King during the United Reroll because you would see him posting and then you stopped following him at the end of that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And I apologize if I did ask you this, but had you met Mr. King prior to the Freedom Convoy?
No.
When did you first meet Mr. King?
I was thinking about this last night. I must have met him while we were on our way to Ottawa, but the first time I remember now meeting him was in Winnipeg when we were discussing Benjamin's concerns with the video that he'd seen that morning about bullets flying. I'm sure I met him along the way before then, but I honestly don't recall. But that was definitely, I remember that conversation, or being on the side of the road.
Okay. And again, I think we'll get to that in a minute. What would you understand Mr. King's role to be in the convoy prior to that conversation?
I believe he was helping with some logistics. He was, I think because of his previous experience with United Reroll, he had a pretty good idea as to the routes that they would be taking. So fuel, helping to try and find fuel, that type of thing.
Fantastic.
If we could pull up COM 50902.
The commission lawyer gets the monopoly of
While
time.
this is coming up, Ms. Leach, this is a news.
So while this is happening, it's very clear. One thing is abundantly clear on the 16th day that we knew weeks ago when the OPP was testifying. No justification for the Emergencies Act at all.
Counsel, that you no longer have access to your text messages. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
What happened to them?
Well, I was in jail for 19 days, and of course, my phone was inundated with messages. And apparently, I found out after the fact there's a setting that you can have on your iPhone where you can have them automatically delete after 30 days, and it was set to that.
So we go to page 3 of this article. Do you see where it says on January 22nd? Do you see there?
I do, sir.
Okay, so it says, on January 22nd, Leach told Barber that they need to have a very frank discussion with King, raising concerns about past allegations against him. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you recall what the concerns were at this point in time?
Well, up until then, I mean, I've obviously followed Pat through the United We Roll convoy, and but I knew him by reputation also, and Pat has Mr. King, sorry, has a lot of people that like him and a lot of people that don't. Like, he's a very controversial figure. So I was getting messages and phone calls from a lot of people that were concerned that he was involved. This frank discussion, I believe, came about because somebody had contacted me and mentioned that Mr. King had lied about being a veteran, and which is a very serious allegation. And I just felt like we needed to have a discussion with him and, you know, a frank discussion and I guess find out the details.
And what was your concern at that point?
Well, there was people that were not joining the convoy because they were concerned about him, and again, because of his reputation. I know he's said a lot of inflammatory things, which I was concerned about, and I was concerned that that would have an impact on what we were trying to achieve. It would take away the focus from what it was we were trying to achieve.
So at this point in time, January 22nd, you were aware of Mr. King's reputation for
Yes.
saying inflammatory things,
Yes.
controversial things,
Yes, sir.
things that people may find racist?
Yes.
Okay. Had you ever been offended by anything that Mr. King had said?
I'm not the type that gets easily offended, sir.
But you recognize that some people would take offense and that could have an effect on the image of the convoy?
Yes.
And I thought I heard you say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were actually receiving messages from people who were expressing a reluctance to participate because of Mr. King's involvement. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many messages you received along those lines?
Oh, geez. I had a conversation with my MP about his involvement. I remember that. He was concerned about it. Cindy Parker had concerns about him also that she'd raised right away. And yeah, I don't know how many messages there was concerns, but there was also people that were there because Pat was involved too. Like I said, he did have his followers also, right?
Right. And if we continue to look at the story, it goes on to say that despite the concerns we've just talked about, you said that he was needed by the movement. And then it makes a commentary about later comments, and then it quotes you later statements, and then it quotes you as saying, "We need him, and I don't care about his past, but it only takes one. We have to control his rhetoric, not even threatening to throw snowballs at Parliament." When you said we need him, was that what you were referring to, that he had a lot of followers? Or was there something else?
That was in reference to conversations that we'd had with the road captains, and some of them, he had been involved from the start and had, made. I think he looked after the accommodations or something in Sault Ste. Marie because he's from that area. So.
He's from the
Yeah,
Sioux?
so that wasn't necessarily.
Pat's from the
me
Sioux? I didn't know
saying
that.
I felt like he was needed. That I was kind of referencing the conversations in general that we were having, and some of them felt that they were concerned that if he left, that the people that supported him would leave. My reference to "I don't care about his past" is that I had to believe that everybody that was involved was getting involved for the right reasons. And as I said, when I spoke with Mr. Barber, and I found out that they were involved, I was aware of his reputation, and I just felt that I didn't want to start this off criticizing other people again, because I just felt like I had to believe that people that were joining this movement were joining it with the best of intentions, regardless of their past.
At this point in time, did you think Mr. King was participating for the right reasons?
I believe he is a passionate Canadian.
So is that a yes?
Yes.
It says here that we have to control his rhetoric. At that point in time, did you think you stood a shot at controlling Mr. King's rhetoric?
Well, he's kind of a beast, and he very much speaks his mind.
He's kind of a
I,
beast.
again, was just
Like,
concerned with,
I- He's a beast.
to be frank,
Beauty and the Beast.
he was a bit of a hothead, in my opinion.
Oof.
And I was just concerned that he would say things or say controversial things or inflammatory things. And so that's why I added in the, like, we can't even be threatening to throw snowballs at Parliament, because that's not what we're here for, right? So
If we can pull up, well, actually, before I do that, so we understand that at a certain point you had a conversation with Mr. King and that you asked him to not come to Ottawa.
that's correct.
And it's our understanding that happened around January 28th. Does that sound correct?
It was in Sudbury.
And describe that conversation to the commission.
Well, we pulled into Sudbury. I believe it was by accident. I think we took a wrong turn. So we ended up in this yard somewhere, and we stopped and had a break. And my recollection was Mr. King came over to the truck, and he said to me, I can't go into Ottawa. I'm getting death threats. And I said, good, Pat, you shouldn't come into Ottawa. And he's made a comment or said something, well, I organized this whole thing. And I said, no, you didn't. We all did. This was basically, I'm paraphrasing, this was a team effort. We all had a part in this. And again, he said something about not going to Ottawa, or he organized the whole thing. And I said, no, you didn't. This movement is not about you. This movement is not about me. You need to check your ego. And if you care about this movement, you will not go to Ottawa.
And in his testimony yesterday, Mr. King denied that you had said you need to check your ego and not come to Ottawa. Did you hear that?
I did hear that.
What was your reaction to that?
Maybe he just doesn't recall it.
So ultimately, as we know, Mr. King didn't take your direction. He did come to Ottawa. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you feel when you learned that he was still coming?
Oh, this is very, I don't know how this is relevant to invocation
had
of the
other
Emergencies
things
Act.
to focus on, and so once we got to Ottawa, I think I saw him 4 or 5 times, maybe. I believe I'd been there for at least a week. Again, a lot of stuff happened in 3 weeks. And the first time I ran into him was down at Parkway one night, and I was just leaving. And so I didn't have a lot of interactions with him when we were there.
To your knowledge, prior to February 14th, and we'll get to that later, but prior to February 14th, did Pat King do or say anything that caused you concern while he was in Ottawa?
I heard a lot of rumors, but I heard a lot of rumors. So again, I had other things to worry about. I let the truckers or the road captains kind of handle that aspect.
If we could pull up HRF 401346 and then go to page 51, I believe. And again, just to give you some context while we wait, I expect the document we will see is a code of conduct for truckers, and I'll have some questions for you about that.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe I'll take a short break at this point, just 5 minutes. to stretch our legs, and we'll come back in 5 minutes.
La commission is in recess for 5 minutes. La commission est levée pour 5 minutes.
That's a lot of people in there. So I definitely don't think you have to say that Tamara has a hell of a lot of love and support. Look at all the people that were in there. I'm sure not all of them agree with the cause, but certainly a lot of them do. And they took time out of their lives and their days and their weeks to come down to Ottawa to show it. So it's hard to describe where we are as a country, isn't it? Well, you know, it's really we're in a place of pure divide, anger, hatred, sadness, loss, chaos, and we really don't have the leader we need at this. You know, we literally had the absolute worst leader that we could have had during the situation we're in right now. The deck could not have been more stacked against Canada to have such an arrogant individual leading our country during this period of great crisis, and literally just taking the opportunity of the situation to put Canadian against Canadian and to cause divide and hatred and anger and fear and panic and all of the like fear. What you don't understand and what some people don't understand is that fear and panic boil over to rage and anger and animosity. People will blame others for their fear and their panic that was instilled into them over all of this stuff. And Trudeau has a massive part to play in that. And so do a lot of the conservatives. Doug Ford, Pierre Poilievre did it at certain points. But of course, Pierre Poilievre is not the government of Canada and the Prime Minister of Canada. So I'm going to put the chief blame on the chief. The captain is the captain. And the captain gets the blame. So, you know, just all this fear, division. People were scared of other people who were unvaccinated. They thought unvaccinated people were killing them and filling their hospitals. Just complete nonsense. And it was all politics and fear and anger and panic. And it really ripped our country apart and caused a cataclysm, a schism, really terrible. And the fact that, you know, Justin Trudeau is perpetuating this, and it's terrible. And he continues to do it. He did it for 2 years. It got really intense after the first year when everything rolled out and all the promises they made were broken. They said they were never going to do a passport. They did a passport. You know, they said that's not. I think Justin Trudeau said of vaccine passports in 2020, early 2021, maybe he said that's not the way we do things in Canada. And you know what, Mr. Prime Minister, at that time, you were correct. That kind of thing is not how we do business in Canada. We don't exclude others, and we don't make panic and fear and anger and hatred against others for political purposes and so forth. That's not how we do things in Canada. I'll take a quote from Justin Trudeau there. But he reneged on his word, and then we had this class war of types between the different people with different medical decisions. It was terrible. And people got so scared and angry, so scared and panicky that translated to fear and rage that they just took out on all these people who made personal, you know, valid medical decisions. You know, no one person was harming the medical system more than any one other person. Fact. Simple fact. Things happened. They went down, and no individual, you know, perpetuated that more than any other individual. We're all humans. We all get sick. We all spread sickness. And this thing here didn't stop sickness from spreading. And we know that for a fact. That's scientifically proven. So, you know, the rhetoric that it did, the rhetoric that people who made different decisions were to blame for the suffering that we were seeing was just disgusting. And finally, after 2 years of othering, of lockdowns, of losing everything, of people dying alone, like like Tamara said there, of all the pain that she so eloquently described, you know, there was this protest, this manifestation to Ottawa from Quebecers, from Albertans, from everybody, Ontarians, everyone in between, everyone on the other side, everyone of the polar opposites came together. We came to Ottawa, and what did the Prime Minister do? He said we were symbols of hate, you know, called us isms, called us ists, you know, anything he could do to other. anything he could do to other. Really bad. And it's awful. Oh, man. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. Really disgusting takes there. I don't want to see it. Don't want to see that. Very sad. So, yeah, like I said, the manifestation, the protest came to Ottawa. People were really upset. They hadn't been heard, and the Prime Minister did nothing but what he did when he seen those, all the support, all the people waving flags, all the massive amount of working class people, of people of every background, professionals, working class people, middle class people, everyone coming together for this, of every background. And what did Trudeau do? He just said that they had hate, that they were ists, that they expressed these unacceptable views, small fringe minority, just to other millions of people again and again, and just really split this political divide. At an older time in our Canadian discourse, that kind of thing would have been the death of it would have been the death of a political career. It would have been, it would have been over for a prime minister, 40, 50 years ago, to act like that. It would have been unacceptable. It's not Canadian. It's un-Canadian. It would have been the death of their political career. And they would be ostracized and ridiculed by the media, rightfully so. But the media does nothing for Justin Trudeau except play his goaltender for him. It's like they literally, all they do, they dedicate their entire existence online, anywhere, to just finding some way, from subtle to direct and in your face, to twist the narrative in the Trudeau government's favor, whether they're doing it with subtlety or whether they're doing it very quite directly. And that's all they do. Every story that has anything to do with the government, they twist it and they twist it and they twist it just to play goaltender. That's not the job of a free press. The press has access to our leaders in such proximity to go and ask them real questions and to hold them accountable, not to play their cheerleaders and goaltenders. So clearly there's huge problems in our power structures here. And it's very disappointing, and it has allowed this cataclysm, this schism between our parts of our society to just grow and grow and grow, and for people to get angrier and angrier and angrier, and people like Justin Trudeau capitalize on that anger, that fear, and that rage to galvanize their base, to try and score political points. I hope over time that it is shrinking, and actually we can see that slowly it is shrinking, because eventually doing that with no ideas and no results after 7 years of running the country into the ground, people get kind of frustrated of it, especially when you're taking their entire bank accounts go empty because of your policies and your inflation. So it will come to the bell will ring, eventually, to that. In the elections, they've been, the last two elections, they squeaked by against very highly, and I can't stress this enough, the last two Conservative candidates, Aaron O'Toole and whatever the other one was, can't recall the other one's names right now, but just two exactly, and that's the problem. You can barely remember these people because their personalities are like wet pieces of bread. It was almost as if the Conservatives were trying to lose running Aaron O'Toole and the other ones, when we have people like Dr. Leslyn Lewis and so many and other well-suited candidates who would have been a million times better. Certainly better ideas, better policies, more likability, more charisma. You need a little bit of charisma in a leader. and they're running these wet pieces of bread, these wet blankets, as you would call them, with no charisma, no personality at all. You can't even remember the name of these people. It was like they were trying. And what I want to say is that Justin Trudeau barely squeaked by both elections, the 2021 and the 2019 federal elections, with a minority, not even a majority. He squeaked by. He just barely squeaked by first past the post against these extremely unlikable, unknowable, forgettable, milquetoast, lack of policy, lack of personality characters. So now that he has someone like Pierre Poilievre, who does have a presence, who does have charisma, whether you like him or not, and who, some of the ideas retwisted, retorqued, with an actual alternative that people can attach themselves to, Justin Trudeau's chance of winning in 2025 is non-existent. He doesn't have a chance. There is no chance. Justin Trudeau has no chance of winning in 2025. In 2019, he barely captured a minority. And in 2021, he barely captured a minority against Erin O'Toole. Have you watched Erin O'Toole speak for any amount of time? He's a wet blanket. He's boring. He's soulless in the sense he's got no passion. He's got no care. It's like, what are you telling me what you believe in or what you want me to believe you believe in? What are you even trying to do right now? You're not a leader. You're simply not a leader. And still, I want to point out, in 2019 and in 2021, the Conservative Party won the popular vote. They won it. They won the most votes, but they didn't win the post. They didn't win the first past the post. So again, to reiterate, with this person who has charisma now as the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who has a presence and memorability, he's rememberable. It's like, who he is, whether you like him or not. You know who he is, and Justin Trudeau has that going too. But certainly 7 years of failed policy and economic ruination are not going to help the incumbent, who has only captured 2 minorities in the last 2 elections. So in 2025, does Trudeau has a chance of being reelected? Absolutely zero. Absolutely zero chance. Right now this is the setting sun on the Trudeau administration. That's something that I'm very happy about. And let's see what kind of damage the Trudeau regime tries to impose while they still have the opportunity to do that, right? Because they are in the sunset phase here, folks. There's nobody. The Justin Trudeau we're about to enter a severe recession. People have been hurting over the last 2-3 years. It's about to get a lot worse economically. The effects of the policies of the last 2 years, plus long-standing other variables, are going to hit our economy like a truck. And the incumbent prime minister is going to have nothing to carry him through 2025. It's going to be a very clear victory for the Conservatives in 2025. It will be. And that's what to say about that. But if only we had a leader who could have looked at the situation that we were in and said, maybe I shouldn't go up to 5+ million Canadians and say that they have unacceptable fringe views and take their pain, laugh at it, mock it, say that it's unacceptable, and say that those people in pain take up space. A real leader would have never done that.
Order
For
allowed.
such genuine and severe pain.
Order allowed.
The pain of our country. It's you can't wrap your head around the arrogance of this
The
individual
commission is
Trudeau.
reconvened. La commission reprend.
Thank you for that indulgence. Now we can run through
that was-
to the end, I hope, and
Longer than 5 minutes, by the way.
adjourn before it'll be late, but go ahead.
It will be late. It's going to be
Already
like 9
dark.
o'clock.
So if we could pull up HRF 1346, page 51. And if we could zoom in a bit. So Ms. Leach, this is a document titled Freedom Convoy 2022 Code of Conduct. Are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I am, sir.
Can you describe what it is?
It is a code of conduct. We recognized once the support started coming and we began growing that we should have something in place for people to sign saying that they would adhere to a code of conduct.
Right. And do you recall if this was distributed?
It was put on the backside of the registration forms, I believe.
And those were the registration forms to get reimbursement.
Yes.
Was it distributed in any other manner?
I think they could get them by email or get hard copies. I think we had them up on a website.
Was anything done to proactively distribute them, for instance, to the people who were on the ground in Ottawa?
We had printed off a lot of copies. we had big hopes when this started, and so we'd printed off a bunch of copies to have the road captains take to the drivers to sign, thinking that this would be a fairly simple task. But because of the amount of participation that we had, it was crazy. But I actually did receive a lot of them through email, so they did get out.
I'm not asking for a precise number in any way, shape, or form, but do you have a sense of how many you got back?
I'm not sure. A lot.
Right. And we see here in item 3, it says, be respectful. Everyone will have their own reasons for participating in this convoy, and we need to be respectful of their reasons. What were you trying to capture in that point?
Well, I believe in being respectful, and while I may have been going to Ottawa to, because of the mandates, there are the mandates. I mean, what my reasons were for wanting the mandates to be lifted may not have been the same as somebody else's reasons for wanting the mandate lifted.
To your knowledge, was there anyone there who was seeking to do something other than end the mandates?
No.
And all the people you spoke to, did anyone ever suggest that they had any other goal than ending the mandates?
Other than hearing about the MOU, which, as you've heard today, I haven't even read it yet. But other than that, no.
And what were you hearing about the MOU? I know you haven't read it, but what were you hearing about it?
What did I hear about it? I just heard that it was a document that was to be presented to the Governor General. I really don't recall all the details. It was just a general in passing, I guess.
Item number 4 says not promote harmful media.
Mm-hmm.
What did you consider to be harmful media?
Well, no hateful rhetoric. We didn't want any sort of divisive rhetoric. Just again, it goes back to point 3, be respectful. We didn't, I was on lives daily saying that we are going to Ottawa to peacefully protest and exercise our democratic right to assembly. We are not going there to create problems and, you know, I said, if you see anyone that's acting in a threatening manner or an aggressive manner, to get their license plates, phone the police and report it, or contact us and we could report it. We just didn't want any of that type of behavior happening here because that was never what it was about.
Did you believe that there might be people in the convoy who may promote hateful content?
It was a concern. Again, I know when we were on our way at one point, I believe it was when we got to Thunder Bay, we were on our way to Thunder Bay, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody had contacted me saying they thought that there was infiltrators, Antifa, that had infiltrated our convoy from Winnipeg that were maybe going to cause some problems for us. So there was always, that kind of information was always coming to us, right?
Other than potential actions by Antifa, were you concerned about other people potentially making or promoting hateful content?
Not really. Everyone that I talked to and saw, and we're all there for the same reason.
At any point in time, to your knowledge, did any of the organizers have to do anything to have to take any action because there was reports of either threats, harassment, violence, or hateful conduct, or anything that you would have thought was inappropriate?
Well, of course, there was the conversation that Benjamin, when he called me that one morning when we were on our way, I think it was our second day, and there had been a tweet come out about Mr. King talking about bullets. And so that was obviously concerning. We stopped and we chatted with him on the side of the road about it. He indicated that it had been heavily edited by some media, I'm not sure. But it was obviously concerning.
Do you recall if that bullet comment, whether there was, we've heard evidence of two bullets, comments from Mr. King, at least two. One was Trudeau, you're going to catch a bullet, and one was this will all end in bullets. Do you recall which one of those?
It was the ending in bullets one. I don't remember ever hearing about the one about the Prime Minister.
Ms. Leach, you can take that down now. Ms. Leach, you've watched much of these proceedings, so you've heard a lot of the evidence that we've heard about people complaining about the horns, people saying there was harassment, there was intimidation, there was unsafe, there's unsafe settings. We've had evidence from citizens of Ottawa who said they felt unsafe in their own city. Do you have anything to say to that?
I encountered hundreds and hundreds of Ottawa residents when I was here, thanking me, thanking us, saying that we gave them hope. Ottawa residents and, in fact, federal government employees that were taking donations of food to the truckers, blankets, fuel, and yeah, everyone had said the same thing to me, that I mean, the word that I heard the most on the way here and when I was here was hope.
Many of the protesters who have testified this week have shared a similar message, talked about the positive, loving atmosphere that that they experienced in the protest. Do you deny that there were incidents of harassment or incidents of intimidation or threatening like the ones we've heard? Do you deny that that happened?
I never witnessed it. I never witnessed any of that type of behavior. Again, there was always rumors, but I never personally witnessed any behavior like that whatsoever. I also heard that the Russians were involved. I also heard that we tried to burn a building down. I mean, there was a ton of misinformation out there. I had my family from Edmonton messaging me, texting me, asking if I was okay, and they were really worried about my safety. And I said, worried about my safety? Like, this is the biggest love fest I've ever participated in, right?
When you hear the citizens of Ottawa, not all of them, I appreciate that, but when you hear some of the citizens of Ottawa say, I felt harassed, I have felt intimidated, I felt unsafe, do you believe them?
I believe that's how they felt. Again, I can't say I never witnessed any of that. Obviously, the last thing that we ever wanted to do when we came here was to make the citizens of Ottawa feel that way. And I guess, you know, as we alluded to even in our letter with the mayor, right? Like, we never intended for that to happen, and we didn't want to cause that kind of disruption. And we worked really hard. The road captains worked really hard to keep the emergency lanes open, and of course, the horn injunction came in and worked really hard to ensure that that was adhered to, because we definitely would never wanted anybody to feel that way.
Right, and once the horn injunction came in, that was now a court order. But
Yes.
prior to the court order, did you have a view on the honking?
Well, I did have a view on the honking, as even Mr. Barber said. After a couple of days, it was getting to be a bit much for me. I you know, trying to walk down the street and have a conversation with somebody was sometimes difficult. But again, I stayed in the Arc Hotel for a few days, and then at the Sheridan Hotel for a few days. And at least in my room, maybe I was preoccupied, but I didn't hear a lot of horns. But then we were on, I guess, Slater and Albert.
Did you see yourself as someone who had a level of influence over the convoy and the protest?
I felt like I was respected, that my opinion was respected by most of them, yes.
Did you ever consider, given what you said that you started to get annoyed at the horns, I take it you probably at some point understood that the horns was causing frustration to a lot of people. Is that fair?
I'd heard that, yes.
Did you ever consider taking any steps to use the respect you had to reduce or eliminate the horn honking prior to the court order?
On or about February 4th, I want to say, my Facebook page was disabled, which is how I accessed the Convoy page to do videos. So I couldn't have, I guess, but I never really considered it because I left that type of stuff up to the captains.
And was it, again, given the respect that you felt you had, and the evidence bears that out, or that we've heard a lot of evidence on that, do you think that if you had asked the captains to take action with respect to the horns, that they would have listened to you?
Well, they already were, so it wasn't necessary for me to.
So had you instructed the captains to stop the horn honking?
I don't know. I don't think I instructed them to. I believe we had discussions about the horns, though.
And what was the result of those discussions?
Well, for sure, I know Mr. Barber would go out and try and talk to the drivers, and I believe Mr. Morazzo was also out to try and get them to slow or cease, become less frequent. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm going to move to another topic now, and I apologize. I am moving around in time.
It's okay.
The commissioner is aware that on January 30th, you attended a press conference with Mr. Barber and Mr. Dichter. This would be before the arrival of Mr. Wilson. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yes.
Okay. And you had mentioned earlier that you were uncomfortable attending a press conference on February 2nd. Do you recall why you were comfortable attending this press conference on January 30th?
Well, I wouldn't say I was comfortable. I was still quite nervous, but Mr. Barber and Mr. Mr. Barber and Mr. Dichter were friends of mine, and also we had made the conscious decision at that point to not have the mainstream media there. So I felt like the independent media were not going to be aggressive with me, if that makes sense.
And with respect to the Taking Back Our Freedoms press conference, was your understanding the mainstream media would be there?
They were there, yes.
If we could go, so the video, the commission has the video, it's COM 50850. I'm not proposing to pull it up because again, that would be the end of the day. But unless there's objection, I would like to enter it into the record. And then I'm going to ask you about the transcript, which is COM 895.
Yes.
So if we could pull up COM 895 and go to page 10 of the transcript, page 11 of the PDF. So if we can scroll down. So scroll down, stop right there. Actually scroll up just a little bit. There we go. So an unidentified reporter asks you, notes that Maxime Bernier has sort of had a rally here in downtown Ottawa today. Are you associated with him at all? Are you pleased with support he's given the convoy? What are your thoughts on that? And you respond, we're not associated. We took a vote as an organization, all the committee heads and the organizers, and we are not partisan. We had reached out to a couple of others. A couple of other ones reached out to us, and we wanted to get up and speak, and we said no. That's not what we're about. This is a grassroots movement, and no politicians are going to represent us. I mean, they're kind of the reason we're in this mess in the first place. Do you recall saying that?
I do.
Right. Why was it important to you that the movement was nonpartisan?
Well, because I guess right within the first couple of days of us starting to organize before we'd left, I did have politicians reaching out to me that wanted to get up and speak. And I just felt like we had our message And that's the message that we needed to stick to without getting it convoluted with the messages of other politicians. And so by this point, to tell you the truth, I shouldn't say that I'm telling the truth, but it was about 3 days into organizing the convoy that I knew that my time with the Maverick Party was done. And the reason I knew that it was done was because I was sitting at my kitchen table, and we had chats with the different road captains in the different areas going on Messenger. And I was chatting with the Quebec team, and we were told there was 1,000 truckers ready to come and support us. And I had, I guess, an epiphany moment. And there's me, you know, chatting here, and I got Google Translate on the other one, and I'm talking to the Quebecers, me and Albertan. And I just had this moment where I just thought, this division has all been a lie. They're the same as us. And I knew that I didn't want to see Canada divided at that point. And I resigned from my position with the Maverick Party up 2 or 3 days after I arrived in Ottawa.
So,
Claude, I'm in town,
as
but
understand what you just said
I'm
there,
so
that,
busy,
seeing,
man.
Seeing
Like,
the pan-Canadian
I
nature
have no
of
time.
the convoy
Love
led
you,
you
though.
to no longer be interested in an Alberta secession.
That's correct.
Do you still hold that
I
feeling?
do. As a matter of fact, I'm going to learn French.
We've already referenced that Mr. Eros had an interview with the commission and provided us some information. One of the things Mr. Eros said was that he suggested, I should say, in his interview that once Mr. Wilson and the other lawyers arrived in around February 3rd, I guess, as he describes it, the Western sovereigntist movement tried to take control of the narrative. Do you have, at any point in time, did you get any sense that there was direction or influence from the people that you would have known through your time at the Maverick Party?
Absolutely not.
The health mandates are themselves dividing Canadians, Diana, and in fact, they never really helped much of anyone. They just ruined the economy and hurt people, and they were a political tool to score political one-upmanship points by divisive governmental leaders.
Sorry, my bad. Colin Kruger also showed up for a few days.
When did you first become aware of the protests and blockades in Coutts, Alberta?
Oh, I'm not even sure. We had so much going on here to deal with. I remember hearing about the borders, but I'm not sure when it was. It has already been in the news for a few days, I think.
Did you know anyone who was participating in the protests or blockades there?
It's sort of my home area, so I do know 2 of my friends that were there for sure. But I believe my parents even took food there one day. But other than that, I don't know.
Were your friends there? Were either of them involved in organizing the protests or the blockades?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Were you communicating with your friends who were in Coutts?
I think one of them had sent me a text message just to see how I was doing, because he was a friend of mine, and mentioned that he was there. But other than that, no.
Did your friends or anyone reach out to you to request support or guidance on how to organize a protest?
Never.
Did you have any understanding about the makeup of the protest group at Coutts?
I did not. I really did not have time to follow what was happening closely. I just knew that they were happening.
What did you understand their goals to be?
I think they were there, I assume they were there for the border mandates.
Did your friends tell you what they were doing when they were participating?
No,
Or sorry, why they were participating, to be more precise?
no.
Asking other people about other people's thoughts and intentions is just the most wild form of reaching. This government has absolutely no justification for the Emergencies Act. They're like, can you tell us what this guy was thinking when he went to that drive-through and why he ordered the double sandwich meal? Joke.
Sir,
No,
It's a
sir.
joke.
if we could pull up HRF 1294. So if you scroll down, so this is an email dated Friday, February 11th, 2022. And while it's blocked out, I believe this is an email that was sent to you. Is that correct?
I had 15,000 emails, maybe.
Well, let's scroll up and put some context to
Sure.
it then. So you see there on 2 days later, there's an email message from February 13th from Tamara with a signature, sincerely Tamara Lich. So it appears that you're forwarding this email onto someone named Danny.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have any reason to believe you didn't receive the email down below?
I don't, yeah, I don't have any reason to believe I didn't. There was a lot I didn't get to.
And if we can scroll down. So it says, good afternoon. Please, we are looking for help to get in touch with an Ottawa convoy organizer or someone who can help us. My uncle is desperately trying to organize the convoy in Windsor. Currently, there is no persons in charge. We are in immediate need of help and direction from the Ottawa convoy organization. We are not looking for funds so much as support, direction, and to make the connection with your convoy. And scroll down. I will continue reading. And then it's signed by a Kathleen Tom in brackets Hogan. Do you recognize the name Kathleen Tom or Kathleen Hogan?
I do not.
Do you recall if you had any other communications from Miss Tom?
I don't.
Do you recall, does this refresh your memory at all about whether or not you received any other similar messages from anyone in Windsor or any of the other protest locations?
No, like I said, I had a lot of emails that I never got to, but I don't recall seeing any of them.
Now I'm going to ask you some questions about the agreement that was reached with the mayor of Ottawa with respect to the moving of the trucks. And again, the commission has heard a lot of evidence about that, but I have a few questions for you. When did you first come to know that it was possible that
So wait, somebody sent them a random email asking for help in Windsor, and she never responded to it. And this is relevant to the government invoking Canada's most severe law. How? What a bunch of baloney.
At that point, he didn't indicate to me who he was representing. I think he was just trying to open some negotiations, and I think it was maybe the next day or after that that I found out that it was from the mayor,
and so
or that he was there on behalf.
and so you said that was February the 11th?
I think it was a Friday, February the 11th.
And as we understand it, the letters that you and the mayor exchanged were on February the 12th. Does that accord with
Yes.
your recollection?
It does.
So that happened pretty quickly, didn't it?
It did, yes.
Can you explain to me how that developed over such a short period of time?
Well, as I said, we had a meeting with Mr. French and some of the road captains and other volunteers, and it happened really quickly because we wanted. I viewed it as a first step to start, getting the trucks out of the downtown core so that we could get those areas opened up for the citizens. And what have they been saying here? Shrinking the footprint or whatever. And it did happen really fast. And you have to understand that we had been there now for, I think that was going into our third week. We were tired. We wanted to go home. So we were looking for ways where we could start forming an exit strategy. And while our concern was obviously never with the city of Ottawa, we felt it was a step one. And number two, finally, someone is willing to sit down and just listen to us and have a dialogue with us.
So you were open to the notion of shrinking the protest footprint with an eventual view to an exit. Is
Yes.
that fair?
Yeah.
Did you have a timeline in your mind about how much longer you were willing to stay?
Not really. Everything was very fluid and day by day. I guess my hope was that if we could open communications with the mayor, and he could see that we weren't, the types of people that we were being described as in the media, that perhaps that would open the door for talks with someone, with MPs or someone in the federal government who would take the time to sit down and listen to us.
You heard Mr. Dichter testify earlier today, I believe. Is that correct?
I heard parts of it.
Parts
yes,
of it. Okay.
yes.
Well, Mr. Dichter, his evidence in some summary was that he did not want to shrink the footprint, and in fact, he thought shrinking the move up to Wellington was a bad idea, and it was an attempt by some people to.
And in fact, Mr. Dichter hasn't been heard of or seen since the protest. Who is he, anyways? A lot of questions around that.
I don't recall having that conversation, but again, there was lots going on.
Do you recall if anyone within the board of directors or anyone who you were talking to on a regular basis, whether there was any dissenting voices, anyone who thought this was not the right move?
Well, we talked with the road captains before that letter went out and had agreement. We discussed the draft of the letter, I believe, and Mr. Wilson and Mr. Chipiak drafted it and emailed it to everyone so that they would have a chance to read it also, and waited for the approvals to come back in. I don't recall if any of them strongly opposed it, to tell you, like, I'm not sure. I don't believe so.
Mr. Dichter also testified today that after the news of the agreement came out, he received thousands of, I think maybe 2,000 messages of people who had concern and seemed disappointed or upset. Was that something he expressed to you?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall receiving any negative feedback from anyone after the deal became public on the 13th?
I think there was some people that felt a little bit confused. I mean, I remember hearing that some people didn't feel or felt a little bit confused about what was happening. I remember hearing something to the effect of Tamara's negotiating with the mayor behind our backs, which was not true. But again, it was just all rumor, like,
So do you recall someone specifically saying to you that Tamara's negotiating behind her backs?
No, I don't recall any specific people telling. I just remember the gist of some of the things that I was hearing.
Right. And other than the road captains and the board, with the fact of the negotiations, was that something that was discussed with the protesters more generally before the deal was entered into?
We printed off some information after we discussed it as a group, and went out to speak to the truckers about it, to explain to them why we felt this was a really good idea. I'm not sure what the experiences were of the road captains. I know I went out to 88, I believe it was, and had a great conversation with the gentleman that was kind of overseeing out there, and he was in full agreement. I talked to some of the other truckers that were out there, and they were in full agreement also. They all thought it was a good idea.
And we heard today Mr. Dichter talk about the tweets that he made, both from his personal account and from your account, after the deal was announced publicly in the media. When did you first learn that Mr. Dichter had tweeted and then retweeted from your account that there had been no agreement?
Must have been that same evening. I believe I was at the Swiss Hotel when that came out. And I think it was definitely after the fact that I'd heard about it. And it must have been that same evening, I'm assuming.
What was your reaction?
I was shocked, but I knew that Mr. Wilson, they'd seen it right away. I think he saw it come up on his Twitter right away, and I trusted them to look after it. Correct it, I should say.
Did you ever discuss the tweets with Mr. Dichter?
I don't believe so, because so many things happened after that. Monday was the invocation of the Emergencies Act, which we found out when we were actually, ironically, on our way to meet with Mr. Brian Peckford. And, I don't recall having the conversation with him about that, but I could have. It was because it was kind of a big deal.
Well, and the nature of the question was kind of a big deal. Do you, I take it then, but you don't recall any specific conversations with him?
I don't, sir.
Mr. Champ suggested, I think at some point yesterday, that in addition to the tweets that you went on a Facebook live stream at some point and said you didn't support the deal that had been struck with the mayor. Do you have any recollection about that? Does that ring any bells?
That doesn't ring any bells to me.
Were you here yesterday when Mr. King testified?
I was, yes.
And so you would have seen that the commission showed a video that Mr. King released after the deal had been announced.
Why
in
so
which he said
much
there was
about
no deal?
so
He
much about
called it,
Pat
said it's a
King?
lie.
When Pat
It's
King
a
was here, no
false
one had any
flag,
questions
and told
for him.
everyone to hold the line. Did you see the video at that time?
I did not.
When was the first time you saw that video?
In totality, was yesterday. I believe I heard about it. Well, I know I heard about it, but I believe that yesterday was the first time I watched it, the whole thing. I might have seen bits of it before.
What was your reaction to seeing it yesterday?
Well, Mr. King wasn't in our meetings, so I don't really have a reaction. I mean, he wasn't attending our meetings. I don't know if like I said, my interactions with him were quite limited. So I don't know if he'd spoken to one of the other road captains or if anybody had told him what was going on. So
I
Oh,
take
that's
it
still
he
up. I
didn't
didn't
reach
mean
out
that.
to you.
no.
And would you have expected Mr. King, before coming out and saying that a deal you had entered into was a lie, would you have expected him to come and check with you first?
Robert, it was 100% legitimate. I can tell you that from
Guess
personal
so.
experience.
I don't really know. He kind of does his own thing.
And I'm just going to put this up just in case.
Do you still think that Mr. King was at the protest for the right reasons?
I have never heard him speak from his lips
So-
that I could hear racist comments. I've
Okay,
seen the videos that have been, online that you guys have shown. I personally have never bared witness to that. And I believe at his core, he was here to, just like the rest of us were, to exercise his democratic rights to a peaceful assembly.
Do you have any
How
regret
is-
that Mr. King was associated with the convoy?
How is Tamara supposed to answer any
I've
of
thought
these
a lot
questions
about that question.
from someone else's brain?
and
It makes no sense.
He is a part of the story.
Why not ask the commissioner that?
And
Why do you need Tamara? Go to the commissioner and say,
Commissioner, I
Commissioner,
can't really have regrets because
what do you
it is
think
what
about
it
Pat
is.
King's thoughts
The
when
things
he was in
happened the way that
Ottawa?
they were supposed to happen, and
What was Pat King thinking in
I guess he
Ottawa,
had a
Mr.
part of-
Commissioner?
a part
Ask
to
somebody
play.
on the
I don't
street. You'll get
know.
the same answer. It's that silly, guys.
That's a hindsight
that's
is
where
2020,
we're-
right?
That's where we're at right now. It's all about Pat King. But yesterday when Pat King was on the stand, no questions for him.
As everyone
now
in this
they're-
room knows, the Emergencies
They're
Act
asking
was
people to
invoked on
read other
February
people's
14th,
minds. It's
2022.
boggling. It's
After
wacky.
the invocation
Looney
of the act,
Tunes.
what was your understanding
Tunes.
about whether or not people could continue to protest in the red zone peacefully?
This is Looney Tunes. It's like,
Well, nobody
can
had
you
ever
tell
come
me
up
what
to me
other
and
people
told me
were
that we needed to
thinking?
leave.
Jeez
Have you
Louise.
seen the flyers
We-
that have
Where,
been
okay,
sh-
where's
that
the
have been shown
evidence
in the
of,
evidence,
attempting to
OPS
sabotage
flyers
Canada,
giving notice
of
that,
threats to people or
needed to
property,
vacate the
of
area?
foreign
I did,
influence or
yes. Yeah, I
funding?
did see those.
Where are these
Do you
things that
remember seeing flyers
justify
like that at
a
the time?
national emergency?
I did see
Not,
somebody sent
"Can
me a
you tell
screenshot
me
of
what
one.
someone
I
was thinking
can't
the
remember if
other
I had an
day?"
actual copy of it, but I had a screenshot
You know what?
of
Go
one.
to
and
a
I thought it
random
was odd.
restaurant and ask people
Um,
in line what the person in
Now
front
it's
of them
been a
is
while,
thinking
but
about.
I think it was because
You know
there
what
was
I would say if
spelling
somebody came up
mistakes
to
and it
me at a
wasn't
line
signed
at
by
some
anyone.
place
I
and asked
didn't
me what the
know.
person in front of me was thinking about, I'd say, "Are
I
you
guess at this
schizophrenic?
point I
Tell
was
me what
kind of
your head is
questioning the
telling you they're
validity of
saying.
anything I saw.
What's wrong with
really.
you? It's called the
And,
mental hospital.
It was definitely
It's
alarming.
ridiculous. It's
but again,
ridiculous. This line of
Nobody ever
questioning
came
is
to us
stupid.
and said, "You guys have to leave right now." And as far as I was concerned, we were
Tamara isn't
peacefully
doing anything
protesting.
incorrect here. Tamara's not throwing
We were
anyone under the bus.
exercising our democratic rights to be here.
She's
and
being
to
asked about
protest.
other people's thoughts, which is just ludicrous. Ask
So if no one came and told
you get the
had
same
to leave,
answer if
what
you
did
ask
think
anyone else the same question, because we
impact or
can't
purpose
tell
of the
you. Ask
invocation of the
that
Emergencies
person
Act
was on the stand yesterday. Ask them. You had the chance to ask them.
Again, this
It's
is an entirely
ridiculous.
new
Asking
world
about
for
people's
me. I
thoughts.
didn't know.
Ridiculous.
I remember when
Preposterous.
I believe the city of Ottawa implemented a state of emergency, and then
Probably.
Mr. Ford invoked a provincial state of emergency. And I don't want to sound flippant, but what I saw from those were small groups of police officers standing around to larger groups of police officers standing around.
That's crazy.
So I didn't understand fully, I guess, what that meant in terms of what was expected of us. So it was really alarming. I remember starting to get quite anxious about what could be coming.
As one of the people who was organizing the movement, as the person who you at least identified had been held out as a leader, even if you didn't feel that way, did you take any steps to figure out what it meant that the Emergencies Act had been invoked and what that meant for the people who were protesting and the people that you understood to be supporting your convoy?
Well, as I said, we were on the way to meet with Mr. Peckford when we heard that Mr. Trudeau was going to be invoking the act or announcing that he was going to be invoking the act later that day. And Mr. Peckford thought it would be a good idea for us to do a press conference about it also. And so we did do a press conference later that day prior to the Prime Minister's press
The
conference.
trolls.
And we wanted to continue and peacefully protest.
100%.
I knew that people were leaving, which I
Totally.
encouraged. And I believe it was the 16th. It was the day before I was arrested that some of the road captains and friends that were close to our organization started leaving, which of course I encouraged. I mean, I was concerned about what could be coming. We had heard that there was quite a police presence coming, and obviously I didn't want to see anyone be hurt. I didn't want to see anybody get arrested.
At that point in time, was it your view that it was time to leave Ottawa?
It was getting close.
And you already mentioned that you got arrested on February 17th.
Yes, sir, I did.
Can you tell the commission what it was like to be arrested?
Well, it was, again, kind of ironic because I went down to the War Memorial that day to attend the service that the vets were having there every day. I spent my afternoon walking the streets with a veteran and my husband and Miranda, one of the road captains, just talking to people. And I was aware the night before, I'm sure you saw the video, that it was most likely coming.
That's hilarious.
Or that there
Watch
was a
out.
chance that I could be arrested. And we went back to the hotel, and within 15 minutes, everybody's phones started blowing up and that Mr. Barber had been arrested. Mr. Bulford and I were at the Swiss Hotel with Mr. Skubik and Mr. Tyson, and we discussed what we should do, what our next steps should be. And we were concerned that if they were starting to arrest the organizers, that they would come to the hotel. And my husband was there, and Mr. Bulford's wife was there. And obviously that was the last thing that I would ever want my husband to see, was to me be arrested. We definitely didn't want that sort of activity occurring at the hotel with a woman who had been so kind to us, actually who was about to lose her business until we showed up. But like I said in my video, I wasn't afraid. I believe and still believe that we did an excellent job remaining
You did.
peaceful,
You did.
advocating for the police, advocating for respecting the police. And so we made the conscious decision to go out and ask the police if they were looking for us. We walked up to the hill, and I believe it was Metcalf, and we stopped and talked to some officers. I'm not sure what their rank was. There was two Suburbans pointed with their headlights up at the hill, and we walked up to them, and Mr. Bulford identified who we were and asked the gentleman if we heard that they were looking for organizers. We're part of the volunteers, and he indicated to us that he didn't have information on that. Danny asked him maybe a second time, or he asked him another question, and he rolled his window up, communicated with somebody, rolled his window down and said no. And I remember saying, well, if that changes, we're just going to be up at the hill here. And we went up to the hill, and I think we were there for an hour and a half to 2 hours. And we decided to go back to our room. We'd presented ourselves to the police. They indicated that we were not, they were not looking for us. We walked down to the Arc Hotel and warmed up. It was cold that night. And I believe Sean was staying there and needed to get something. So we warmed up in there for about 10 minutes and then started heading back to the Swiss Hotel. As we crossed the street, there was construction on my left side of the street in front of the buildings, I remember, so it wasn't very well lit. And as we were walking, I met another couple coming towards us, and the lady hugged me and thanked me, and Danny, and she was crying, and we were standing there talking to this couple, and all of a sudden 3 Suburbans just went, police Suburbans, I think that's what they are, went flying down the street past us. And then a 4th one came and pulled over. And so at that point, I was pretty sure that I was about to be arrested.
How has the arrest affected your life?
I've lost my job. I've lost my freedom of speech. I've lost my freedom to communicate with my friends, which was quite traumatizing because we just experienced something huge. And we didn't get any time to even sit down as a group and just talk about it and talk about our experience. We didn't have that opportunity. That was taken away from me. I have to be very careful about every move that I make. As you know, I was arrested on an alleged breach charge for attending a dinner in Toronto. I had the police show up at the place that I'm staying last weekend because somebody saw me outside smoking a cigarette. I have a daughter that I don't want her to be seen with me. Because I'm worried. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
I have yet to see the particulars of the mischief that I am alleged to have committed. It's definitely affected my life. It's something that I've never been arrested before. The legal process, I find extremely frustrating. My trial's not till next year. I have to live under these conditions for a year.
Yeah, no speedy trials here in Canada.
But I'll make it
blocked.
work. I'll manage. And I did everything I felt that I could do in my power through the lives that I was doing. And I believe it worked, as I was advocating again for peaceful protest, respect the police, please respect other people. That was a big part of the reason I did that live the last night. I saw a lot of those flags. And while I support anyone's freedom of speech, it's not something that resonated with me.
She just explained that that happened multiple times that
I
day, and they
saw-
had let her go, and then finally they did arrest her. So
And
listen,
heard of
use
people
your
that were
use your
upset with some
thinking and your
mainstream
listening
media.
skills.
And
KB.
I just wanted to, I did my video because regardless of how angry we are with the lack or the leadership that we've seen, the divisive rhetoric, the division between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated that I've seen come from elected officials, civil servants, towards their own people. And I saw those flags one day, and I kept thinking, I got to get to the stage and make a speech. Like I felt that I needed to get there, and I needed to just say, you know, Mr. Trudeau has 3 children, and I have 3 children. And my kids have to wake up and see this stuff on social media too. Actually, when I was arrested, my 19-year-old daughter woke up to read an article that I hung myself in jail. She's 19.
Concern trolls.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
I already cried. I
we're
already used my tears.
at the stage of adjourning for the day, and I think it's welcome for everybody, so we'll come back tomorrow at 9:30.
Sir,
You have a question, yes?
just a request. As you know, the witness is now technically under cross-examination hasn't started, but we would like permission to be able to communicate with the witness. We actually are all living in the same building. In fact, she's staying.
Pardon me? You have.
Sorry, we'd like permission, sir, leave to be able to communicate with the witness, though she's still under oath. We actually all kind of live in the same apartment buildings and sharing apartments with the witness and things like that. So subject to your direction, whatever works. I understand that that was given to Chief Slawley's counsel. We would like the same prerogative, sir, if that was possible.
I don't think there actually was any permission given. What was pointed out
Yes,
is the
there
rule
was.
does not prevent you from speaking to the witness as long as you don't speak about any of the evidence. So,
I
and
don't-
that's my
actually-
understanding of the
Actually,
rule.
that's
So
not what
you
was
don't
said
need my
to my
permission
memory.
unless you want to speak to her about her evidence, in which case that's a different matter.
No, sir, but as we would have the evening, we would anticipate, we have already, but we would anticipate the possibility of continuing to prepare her for cross. But if that's not permitted, sir, we won't do so.
I don't think that's contemplated by the rule. I'm sorry, anyone wanna
That's what you
pipe
allowed
in on this?
slowly
I'm
to do?
sorry.
I'm pretty sure they gave slowly that
If it's of
opportunity.
assistance, and I'm not certain exactly who helped facilitate the way in which we approach the matter with Chief Slowly, but I believe the application of the rule is that
Yeah,
the
slowly was
witness's
given that
evidence
right.
given to date is not the subject of discussion, but that would, I think my friend would be able to speak about the questions that he intends to ask without going back over what the witness has given.
Yeah.
I believe that's how we reached
Because-
agreement with our friends from the Ottawa Police Service who had raised the issue and with some of your commission.
Yeah, because
I
they
think
did that with
it's
slowly.
lawyers have to be
They did it with
aware of
slowly.
the rule. It's basically the same rule as applies to in courts, and you can't speak about the
But he's-
cross-examination on the evidence. You can prepare, but that's a different matter. And the line, obviously, we rely on lawyers to respect that, obviously. I'm sure it's the same in Alberta.
Kind of. Yes, sir, it is.
We're
Hey,
all
Dana
one country.
Lee! We're all in country, hopefully.
Okay, so till 9:30 tomorrow morning.
The commission is adjourned. La commission est adjournée.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. For the 1,030 of you across all the platforms who were watching at one point, thank you so much. I'm working hard here. I mean, I worked and then I came here and then we talk over this and then I make my stupid summary videos. And I'm having someone helping with the note taking today because I wasn't here. I don't know what happened to Dacey. I'm sure he's fine. Again, personal matters. Let's go through some of your comments real quick before we end the stream because it's 7:30 and I haven't slept more than 6 hours in the last work week. I don't think many realize the sacrifices. Deborah says, I don't think many realize the sacrifices so many in the convoy made for our freedoms. Deborah, I am truly aware of that, and I hope more people are. I have the feeling they are. Derek. Christine, yes, it was sad. I cried earlier. I'm going to admit it. I did cry when Tamara first spoke about all the pain and the people alone and the separation and the anger. And it really did hit me earlier there. So I can't see that one. Too bad her job didn't. Well, Anna, that's the position of millions of Canadians, and a lot of businesses looked at government narratives and said, you know what, I have the authority to do this, when necessarily maybe they didn't. Certainly they did not have the moral authority to do what they did. Well, that's a different story for another pie, Amanda. Whatever, everyone's going to be going on at the same time there. Yeah, that's right, Fern. She has to wait an entire year. So right now we're November the 3rd. To my knowledge, Chris and Tamara are co-accused, and their criminal trial will begin in September of 2023, to my knowledge. And until that point, they will be under the very strict conditions that they have been under since February 2022. So that by that point, it would have been a year and maybe 8 months, I assume, under those conditions by the time they reach their trial. So no matter what the outcome of trial is, they would have by that point already spent, upwards of 20 months under very strict conditions. And certainly Tamara being rearrested at least once, being brought back to court to try and stay out of jail multiple times. Was a the process is the punishment in many of these cases, regardless of what happens at trial. Even if she's acquitted, this has been certainly a huge punishment. And on the opposite side, if she is convicted, hopefully this 20 months of time plus pretrial detention will weigh on any sentencing decisions. Not to say that that's the outcome I'm hoping for, but in a reasonable society, that would be factored in. Waiting 20 months for your trial is a really long time. Not that I follow criminal law closely, but to live under those conditions for that amount of time when you are presumed innocent, because remember, under the law, you are presumed innocent until you are proven to be guilty. So those are very harsh conditions for what is legally an innocent but accused person. Well, Ruth, I'm not sure what you're talking about here, but is it the convoy, and are you sorry you did this? No, Ruth, I think that the convoy saved a lot of people's lives. We've heard testimony to that matter, that a lot of people were on the edge of really dark thinking, and it brought a lot of people back. And certainly it brought the mandates back. You can go through the timeline of things, but really until January 30th, across all of our Canadian provinces, there wasn't any real shift in mandates until the Freedom Convoy was in Ottawa. February 1st, Legault drops the proposed tax on unvaccinated people in Quebec. that was because of the Freedom Convoy. He's seen the Quebecers and the Albertans holding hands in Ottawa, and he knew how significant it was on February 1st. On February 6th or 7th, thereabouts, Saskatchewan and Alberta announced the planned end of their masking and passport programs. So yes, the convoy was directly responsible for the reigniting and reclaiming of freedoms in Canada. And the evidence and the chronology of events certainly proves that beyond any reasonable doubt. Yes, Claude, tinfoil hat guy, thank you, Tamara. Hey. Certainly, Fern, actually, yes, she has been served many papers. The charges are valid and are filed appropriately. Let's not spread any kind of misinformation. Those charges have been, to my knowledge, properly filed, and all the paperwork all the ducks are in a row on that. So that's certainly not an argument to be made, I don't think. Yeah, so Tyler says they have broke down these people, and it's not good. They are answering these questions so willingly to take the narrative off Justin. Everyone is going to say, I don't want to end up like her. They are showing us what will happen to us all. Well, Tyler, if that's the way that we think, then we're going to lose, right? But the Freedom Convoy showed that peaceful protests work, and that they do give you back your rights and freedoms. So, not everything has a cost, Tyler, and people are paying that cost, but certainly they work. Yes, Rhonda says punishment for trying to stand up for freedom, infuriating. It is very infuriating and very sad as well. Well, Mike says, where are our oath-sworn public law enforcement? Well, some of them gave $50 to the convoy and were hence charged for misconduct under the Police Act. So that's where some of them are. Dana says, Tamara should never have been arrested. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting, honestly. Bill says, yeah, and this is what Canada Liberal NDP government lies does for people for speaking the truth. Yes, absolutely. So sad. Praying for you, Tamara, Debbie. So proud of Pat. Angie says that. Lee says, Trudeau must go. Justin, thank you, Tamara, for everything you've done. Yes, thank you, Tamara, so much for everything you've done. Odette says, they took her freedom away. She has to live in fear. The rest says itself. Evie, our country is screwed. What kind of conditions are those? She's got quite a few, quite a lot, actually, of conditions. But to be clear, these are not, to my very brief knowledge, this is not uncommon in criminal circumstances where they take a lot of conditions. Like, these are pretty common conditions. I think there might be a few different ones on there, but I think this is pretty common in criminal proceedings, like no access to internet, social media, But I think it can be unique that, say, for one of their conditions is cannot speak out against the government or speak out against mandates. So that's very unique to this circumstance. Different crimes, different punishments, but that's just kind of sad. Louise, thank you, Tamara. So proud. Judy, they labeled you Tamara. You are a prisoner in your own home and country. Shame on them. Shame on them. They have destroyed your life, but we, the Canadian people, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all that you have sacrificed. And Tamara and Chris and Pat and everyone has sacrificed so much in their own ways and are paying significant prices for it. And thank you so much for what you have done. We owe you. Tyler, this is what's going to happen if you all don't obey. Julie, thanks, Tamara. You did your best. Pappy, say you would do all again for our freedoms. Brenda, thank Trudeau for that. He got his goons in Ottawa to beat Canadians. He did to our heroes, and he will indeed learn from his fails. Karma will show no mercy. Well, Brenda, I think it's important to point out in that circumstance that, we're all about the peace. And, people have severe anger and sadness watching the things that transpired in Ottawa. But we can all agree that we are heading to a democratic resolution with a total victory in 2025, which will see the utter defeat of the Trudeau Liberals. Crystal Paul, we feel you. You don't deserve the crap you are going through either. She does not. Carol, I have been sharing. Thank you, Carol, for sharing the stream. Linda, penalty for mischief is prison. Yeah, can't really, they both have prison sentences to varying degrees, to be honest. But I don't really see, I don't see penitentiary time for Tamara or Chris or for really any of them. I'd be surprised if there was a penitentiary sentence. We'll see what happens. There's a possibility, but we'll see if there's any prison sentence. I would think like maybe community service or something. We'll see how it goes. I know the maximum is 10 years But that's off. That's not going to happen. They're not getting the 10 years. And if they're not getting the 10-year maximum, not even close. There's no way they could justify that in any remote universe. Debbie, big hugs to Tamara. Always much love and respect. Waywin. Heroes truly in history. Your pain, your sorrow will be worth it in the end, Tamara. Tamara Christian says, Tamara is a beautiful person that should have been made people realize what the politicians have done. Mary, proud of all of them. I am so proud of them as well. Daryl, they are all political prisoners for that narcissist Trudeau. He certainly has a little bit of an ego there. Christy says, no one deserved to be jailed or fined over this. They did this. The only things we were taught to do in a situation like this, peacefully and lawfully protest, and it worked. Brenda Day, Pat has children. Karen, crying. We're all crying together. Tyler, no, Tyler, I'm sorry, you're saying that we'll all go to jail. Tyler, there's no jail enough for all of us here. Linda, Tamara is so moving and honest. She is doing an excellent job, and it is coming from the heart. The Great Rebellion, terrible. Well, thanks, Rebellion. I know you're probably not talking about me. So Ruby says, Tamara, you are an angel, and I'm so sorry that this hateful, corrupt government caused so much hardship for so many people. Jermaine says, very sad, Tamara. Thank you. Kim, this lady is a queen of Canada. She's certainly a queen in her own way and a true leader who takes responsibility and who sacrifices tremendously. Thank you, Tamara. Oh, I don't know what that's about. You know, it's about time, jackass. Okay, well, I don't know if you're talking to me. I don't know what the context of that comment was. I mean, it was 10 minutes ago or 13 minutes ago now. So she's so right. Civil servants, we did this to each other. Well, Adam, we already did rise up peacefully during the Freedom Convoy, and the goals were accomplished at great cost. I'm not really sure what a lot of this is saying. Ewa says, very proud of you, Tamara. We are all so proud of Tamara. Certainly I am. I can't speak for you, but I'm very proud. So, Julie, I believe they're saying that they're all kind of staying in the same hotel or something, or the same Airbnb, which makes sense that the legal team would be close to the clients. That's the best way to go, especially when the clients are constantly being hounded. So we'll see how that goes. Sorry, Tyler, I can't really like your comments on here. I'm on a streaming platform. I don't have the ability to like comments. But I agree. You know, you're allowed to share your perspective and your opinion. I just don't share the gloomy, doomy outlook. I know things look bad, but I've seen great improvements at great cost, mind you, and I think we're going to keep making improvements, and we have to believe that. Yeah. So, Kathy, I don't really think anyone is throwing Pat under the bus here. Certainly, I'm not, and I don't really think I didn't think that Tamara was. They have very different opinions on how things should have been reached. But what was really happening was that the counselor was asking a lot of questions about Pat's thinking, which is a very strange line of question. It's like going up to a line, like I said, to a line at someone in a store or a restaurant or something, and asking, you know, the person behind you what the person in front of you thinks about X, Y, or B. And it's just pure nonsense, right? It's like you expect someone to read someone else's mind. So loud, and he does not think before he speaks. He did not handle. Miss Lich has expressed herself. So Kathy, your statement seems to be going in two ways at the same time there, saying that Pat, he is rough around the edges. So you're saying that you stop throwing him under the bus, but then you say that he's jeopardizing the whole mission of the protest. So I'm trying to understand. But in any case, you know, people have their own unique ways to express things, and that's certainly okay. We've got to be very careful about how we express ourselves for many different reasons. But there's also the fact that it's just basic decency, and some people are certainly rougher around the edges. I have to concur with that. Let's give this little. They also didn't allow for hearsay with the others, but they. Yeah, I have to say there is a lot of like asking people what they think, which is kind of crazy. Let's just go down because I'm like 20 minutes behind at this point. We're just about done here, folks. Ruby says, I'm not happy that they keep questioning every witness. Well, I'm very happy they question every witness. I believe they are looking for a fall guy to justify invoking the EA. Certainly, they are looking for something, anything, desperately. I think they tried to establish that Tamara got an email out of tens of thousands of emails from someone claiming to be from Windsor that she never responded to. Completely wild and weird, but absolutely not a justification for the EA in any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, Christy, I did miss the morning. Unfortunately, life does call sometimes, but I will read the notes on that. I do have scribes. All right, everyone, that's probably about enough for today. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Tomorrow we're going to have, let's check it out real quick, who we got going tomorrow. I know we got Jeremy McKenzie, and Jeremy McKenzie's counsel made a motion for a publication ban for his testimony. That publication ban has been denied. So Jeremy McKenzie will be testifying, I assume, from either a courthouse or from the detention facility via teleconference. And it will be public with no publication ban. We also expect to hear from Danny Bulford, who is a really great stand-up guy. I've run into him a few times, never really talked to him, but he seems like a good guy. Chris Deering and Maggie Hope Braun will also be appearing tomorrow. So 4 of them, and of course the cross-examination of Tamara Lich. Have a fantastic evening, everyone. Thank you for joining.